Never Spy Alone, an Onyx Sector Adventure by Craig A. Hart. Prologue. The black BMW 5 Series, its sleek exterior polished to a mirror-like sheen, sat nestled against the curb beneath the sprawling canopy of an ancient oak tree. The car's midnight hue blended seamlessly with the deep shadows cast by the gnarled boughs, their leaves whispering faintly in the cool October breeze. At 43 minutes past midnight, the vehicle was shrouded in near invisibility, a phantom presence on this desolate stretch of road. The street, flanked by overgrown fields and a scattering of derelict buildings, was rarely traveled at this hour. Only the occasional passing motorist, a weary trucker or a lost tourist, disturbed the oppressive silence, their headlights briefly slicing through the darkness before fading into the distance, oblivious to the scene unfolding in the shadows. The man in the driver's seat, a wiry figure in his late 30s, sat hunched forward, his sharp features illuminated faintly by the dim glow of the dashboard. His eyes, shadowed by a furrowed brow, flicked to his wristwatch, a battered stainless steel timepiece that had once belonged to his father. The glowing hands read 12:44. He exhaled a slow, frustrated sigh, the sound barely audible over the soft hum of the idling engine. A few more minutes, he told himself, and he'd abandon this godforsaken rendezvous. His gaze drifted to the black leather briefcase resting on the passenger seat, its surface scuffed from years of use. He reached over, placing his right hand palm down on its cool surface, fingers splaying protectively as if the case might vanish or be torn from his grasp by unseen hands. His jaw tightened, his calloused fingers tracing the worn edges of the briefcase. Inside it lay the culmination of months of planning, a deal that had cost him sleepless nights and more than a few moral compromises. He didn't know the full contents, only that they were valuable enough to make him a target. His contact had been explicit. Deliver the case to this exact spot at midnight, wait no longer than 15 minutes, and leave if no one showed. The promise of a six-figure payout had been enough to silence doubts, but now, sitting in the oppressive quiet, those doubts clawed their way back. 5 minutes later, at 12:49, he checked his watch again, the faint tick of its second hand amplifying the tension in the confined space. His patience had frayed to its breaking point. Shrugging, he gripped the key in the ignition. He'd waited too long already, and the creeping unease in his gut told him something was wrong. The engine purred to life as he turned the key, its low rumble vibrating through the leather seats. His left foot pressed the brake pedal, his right hand hovering over the gear shift, ready to slip the car into drive. But a flicker of red caught the corner of his eye. Victor froze, his foot easing off the brake. He turned his head slightly, scanning the passenger side window, but saw nothing beyond the inky blackness and the faint outline of the oak tree's branches. A reflection of my own brake lights, he reasoned, his mind grasping for a rational explanation. He reached for the gear shift again, determined to leave, when the red flicker returned, this time sharper, more deliberate. His eyes locked onto it, a small crimson dot, no larger than a dime, dancing atop the headrest of the passenger seat. It moved with eerie precision, creeping toward him like a predator stalking prey. His pulse quickened, his breath catching in his throat. He whipped his head around, peering through the rear window, and caught a glimpse of a hooded figure crouched low, barely discernible against the night. Before he could react, the red dot found his right eye, its laser intensity searing his vision. He squeezed his eyes shut instinctively, jerking his head to the left. A deafening crack shattered the silence as the rear window exploded inward, glass shards raining across the back seat. Something heavy and impossibly fast struck the side of Victor's head, and the world dissolved into darkness. The figure behind the BMW remained motionless for a moment, a shadow among shadows. Clad in a black tactical jacket and gloves, the man straightened, his silenced weapon still warm in his hands. He stepped forward, his boots crunching softly on the gravel-strewn pavement, and approached the driver's side door. Trying the handle, he grunted with satisfaction as it gave way with a soft click. The fool hadn't locked it. The interior of the car reeked of blood, the driver's seat now a grisly tableau. The shooter's lip curled in disgust at the mess, but his focus remained razor sharp. Leaning in, he carefully avoided the spreading stain on the upholstery and retrieved the briefcase from the passenger seat. He shut the door with a muted thud and melted back into the night. 20 minutes later, he reached his temporary sanctuary, a rundown motel called the Starlight Inn, its neon sign flickering weakly on the edge of town. Room 17 was a cramped, musty space that smelled faintly of mildew and cigarette smoke, but it served its purposes. He locked the door with a decisive click, then crossed to the window, tugging the faded, moth-eaten curtains shut to block out the world. Only then did he allow himself to relax, if only slightly. He flipped on the bedside lamp, its dim yellow glow casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Setting the briefcase on the chipped formica tabletop, he studied it for a moment, his gloved fingers hovering over the combination locks. He worked methodically, his nimble fingers testing the dials with practiced precision. The first latch clicked open, then the second, the sound unnervingly loud in the stifling quiet of the room. He lifted the lid, his eyes narrowing as he glimpsed the contents, a neatly arranged grid of plastic explosives, wired to a compact detonator nestled in the center. His breath caught, a split-second realization of his fatal mistake. The world erupted in a blinding flash of heat and sound, the explosion tearing through the room with merciless force, reducing him, the briefcase, and the Starlight Inn's Room 17 to a smoldering ruin. 1. The small chirping of James Burke's cell phone tore him from a deep sleep, the remnants of a vivid, sweat-soaked dream clinging to his consciousness. The dream had been a tangled mix of desire and danger, a sultry femme fatale in a chase through rain-slicked alleys, leaving him disoriented as he fumbled in the darkness. Still half submerged in the fog of slumber, he mistook the phone's insistent ring for his alarm clock and nearly smashed it against the nightstand before clarity snapped him awake. He cleared his throat, his voice rough with sleep, and croaked, "Hello? Catch you at a bad time, Tiger?" The caller's voice was clipped, laced with a familiar edge of urgency. The code name jolted Burke upright, banishing the last vestiges of his dream. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, the cold hardwood floor biting into his bare feet. "You interrupted a decent dream, but at least I don't have to pay the lady." "I'm not sure what that means, and I'd rather you didn't explain," the caller said, his tone dry but strained. "Jackal is dead and the briefcase has disappeared." Burke's pulse quickened, his mind sharpening as he processed the news. What happened? Looks like he was pulling a double cross on us. Environmental services were making their rounds about 4 and found him in his car dead. The words hit like a punch. Burke pictured Jackal, a wiry, sharp-eyed operative with a penchant for cutting corners, slumped in his black BMW, the life drained out of him. And you're connecting him with the briefcase's disappearance? He was the last one to have it. If he wasn't changing hats, why would he be sitting out in his car at an ungodly hour on a deserted street with the briefcase? He was supposed to deliver it to his contact this morning, a simple swap. The contact waited at the dead drop, but there's only so long you can act casual. My guess is Jackal was meeting someone else even earlier. A payoff, probably. Only it didn't work the way it was supposed to when he got the double cross himself. Karma, Burke muttered, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. He could almost smell the gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood in the air as he imagined the scene. That doesn't explain why we're getting the shaft. The briefcase is now floating around somewhere and we need to find it. Burke leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, the phone pressed tightly to his ear. What's the plan? Alert all your contacts, Tiger, and fast. To know about the briefcase, our agent friend must have had the inside scoop on us. Therefore, he must be someone close to the organization. Or at least have friends there. I'm hoping by placing an alert on all agents, we can stall the final delivery of the briefcase until we find out where it is and retrieve it. I don't have to remind you how important this briefcase is to the security of the United States. It contains detailed plans concerning our covert operations, both domestic and foreign, including the war on terror. We've got a mole in here somewhere, and I won't rest until we dig him out. Burke's mind raced, mapping out his network of informants and operatives, each a potential weak link. The briefcase wasn't just a container. It was a Pandora's box, packed with encrypted files detailing black ops from Langley to Lahore, names and dates that could topple governments or ignite wars if they fell into the wrong hands. Within the hour, he was at his desk, a chipped coffee mug in hand, firing off encrypted messages to his contacts across the eastern seaboard and beyond. Each alert was laced with just enough ambiguity to sow suspicion without tipping his hand. In this game, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. The life of a covert operative demanded constant vigilance, a refusal to let routine dull the edge of paranoia. Things changed too rapidly, allegiances shifting like sand in a storm. He showered quickly, the scalding water clearing the last of the sleep from his system, and pulled on a pair of faded jeans and a loose gray sweater that concealed the compact Beretta nestled in his shoulder holster. He grabbed his keys from the cluttered kitchen counter, the jangle of metal loud in the quiet apartment, and headed for the side door leading to the garage. As he stepped into the dim, oil-scented space, a flicker of movement caught his eye. The garage, lit only by two small windows high on the far wall, was cloaked in shadow, the early morning sky overcast with heavy slate-gray clouds. Burke froze, his senses sharpening, scanning the gloom for the source of the disturbance. The garage was a utilitarian space, bare concrete walls, a rusted toolbox in the corner, a few cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly, but nothing seemed out of place. He shrugged, chalking it up to a trick of the light, and locked the door behind him with a soft click. Crossing the oil-stained concrete, he slid behind the wheel. He reached over his shoulder for the seat belt when a voice, low and familiar, cut through the silence. You could at least say hello, Tiger. It's been some time. Burke whipped around, his right hand instinctively sliding beneath his sweater, fingers brushing the grip of his pistol. In the passenger seat, half shrouded in shadow, sat Lyndsey Archer, her sharp eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and steel. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she wore a black leather jacket over a fitted turtleneck, blending into the dim interior of the car. Burke recognized her voice instantly. He let his hand fall away from the gun, his heart still pounding. "How long have you been here?" he asked, his tone guarded. "About 30 minutes. Not to be cliché, but what are you doing here?" Lyndsey leaned back, crossing her arms with a faint smirk. "I came to talk to you. Did you think I came for a glimpse of your handsome face?" "I wouldn't hold it against you," Burke shot back, his own lips twitching despite himself. "Still humble, I see. Can we talk?" Burke glanced at the dashboard clock. 6:47 a.m. "I was planning to grab breakfast. You're welcome to join me." "You're paying?" "Still cheap, I see." "It comes from my Depression-era grandmother. But before we go, could I use your bathroom? I've been sitting here for half an hour, and the thought of liquid refreshment is making me nervous." Burke tossed her the keys, the small brass one glinting as it arced through the air. "It's the brass key in the middle of the ring." Lyndsey caught them deftly and slipped out of the car, her boots nearly silent on the concrete as she disappeared through the side door into the apartment. She reappeared a few minutes later, sliding into the passenger seat with a fluid grace that belied the tension in her posture. "Thanks for waiting. I'm ready. Where to?" "Preferences?" Burke asked, starting the engine. "Anywhere with a corner booth and sufficient background noise to drown out our conversation." Her eyes met his, and in them he saw the same guarded intensity he felt coiling in his own chest. Whatever she'd come to say, it was going to change everything. 2. The vehicle rolled to a stop in front of the diner, its tires crunching on the gravel-strewn parking lot, packed with a motley assortment of pickup trucks, sedans, and a few rusted motorcycles. The early morning sky, still heavy with the gray pallor of dawn, cast a muted glow over the squat, single-story building. Above the entrance, a garish neon sign flickered erratically, spelling out Greasy's Diner in buzzing pink and green letters, the apostrophe blinking like a distress signal. Lyndsey, seated in the passenger seat, arched an eyebrow, her sharp eyes narrowing with ill-concealed skepticism as she took in the peeling paint and grime-streaked windows. Burke caught her expression and chuckled, the sound low and warm in the confined space of the car. "Don't let the name fool you. Their breakfast menu is world-famous." His tone carried the easy confidence of a man who'd spent too many mornings in dives like this, chasing leads and nursing black coffee. They stepped out into the cool air, the faint scent of frying bacon and motor oil mingling in the breeze. Inside, Greasy's diner was a mayhem of clattering dishes, shouted orders, and the low hum of conversation from the crowd of truckers, locals, and bleary-eyed shift workers. The black and white checkered tile floor was cracked in places, worn smooth by decades of heavy boots, and the ceiling bore unsightly brown stains from water damage, giving the place a lived-in, almost defiant charm. Lyndsey's skeptical look morphed into one of barely concealed disgust, her lips pursing as she dodged a sticky spot on the floor. Before she could voice her disdain, a waitress with a faded name tag reading Darlene approached, her peroxide blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. She guided them through the crowded dining room to the corner booths tucked against the far wall, its red vinyl seats cracked but mercifully secluded. They slid into the booth, the vinyl cracking and creaking under their weight. Darlene dropped two grease-spotted menus onto the chipped formica tabletop, her jaded eyes barely registering them. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice flat with the exhaustion of a double shift. Burke nodded unfazed. Lyndsey shot him a wide-eyed, pleading look, her fingers hovering near the edge of the table, as if afraid to touch it. "I'm not sure I—" "You said you wanted a private place to talk," Burke cut in, his voice low but firm. "No one will hear you in here, or even care." He glanced up at Darlene, who tapped her pen impatiently against her notepad. "She'll have coffee." "Wonderful," Darlene said, her monotone dripping with indifference. "Cream and sugar on the table. I'll be back for your order in a sec." She shuffled off, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the tile. Burke gestured toward Lyndsey's menu, its edges curled and faintly sticky. "Go ahead. I already know what I'm getting." Lyndsey opened the menu with just the tips of her fingers, as if handling evidence at a crime scene. Her eyes scanned the smudged print, her brow furrowing. "These names seem rather cryptic. The morning surprise, the classic egg combo. What's this? The ham heaves breakfast?" Burke laughed, a deep, genuine sound that cut through the diner's din. "That's the ham heaven breakfast. I'm sure the manager makes these menus himself in the back room on an old inkjet printer. There's always a typo or two, although that's the best I've seen yet." He leaned back, his eyes glinting with amusement, as he recalled the time he'd ordered the pancake platter only to receive a single soggy flapjack. Darlene reappeared, her notepad at the ready, and took their orders with the enthusiasm of a funeral director. Burke opted for the classic egg combo, 2 eggs over easy, bacon and hash browns, while Lyndsey, after a moment's hesitation, settled on a plain bagel with cream cheese, clearly unwilling to risk the diner's more adventurous offerings. They made small talk as they waited, their voices low, the words carefully chosen to avoid drawing attention. The food arrived quickly, served on chipped ceramic plates that had seen better days. Burke dug in with gusto, his fork scraping up runny yolks and crispy bacon, while Lyndsey poked at her bagel with undisguised loathing, her knife spreading a thin layer of cream cheese as if it might be contaminated. "How can you eat this stuff all the time?" she said, grimacing as she set her knife down. "It's greasy as hell." "If you lower your standards enough to taste it, you'd find it's not too bad," Burke replied, mopping up a stray bit of egg with a piece of toast. "You'll have a heart attack at 50, eating all this grease." Burke grinned and polished off the last of his hash browns. "So tell me, what's so important you had to scare the shit out of me this morning? Don't tell me you're getting bored." Lyndsey gave up on her bagel, pushing the plate aside with a sigh. She leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table, her voice dropping to a whisper that blended with the diner's ambient noise. "You've heard about Jackal, I assume?" "Yes. Moore called earlier this morning." "What else did he tell you?" "Not much. He said it looked like Jackal was pulling a double cross." "Do you believe that?" Burke paused, his coffee mug halfway to his lips, and thought for a moment. He shook his head slowly, his expression darkening. "Not really. At least I don't want to. I knew him well, never pegged him for a traitor. No one ever does, I suppose." He could still picture Jackal laughing over a beer at a dive bar in D.C., his quick wit and easy charm masking the steel beneath. The idea of him selling out felt like a betrayal of more than just the agency. "But why would he do that?" Lyndsey pressed, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "What could he gain?" "Money, I suppose." "Oh, come on, Burke, he didn't need the money." "Neither do the world's billionaires, but they always go for the extra buck." Jackal wasn't a driven, hard-nosed business tycoon. "Mr. Silver Spoon himself," Burke said, recalling Jackal's penchant for tailored suits and vintage watches, a playboy's flair that never quite matched his razor-sharp fieldwork. "More of a playboy than anything else, although he was good at his job," Lyndsey said, her voice tinged with frustration. "It doesn't make sense." "Okay," Burke said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "Let's assume for a moment Jackal was not pulling a double cross. Why was he killed, and where is the briefcase?" "All I'm saying is something isn't right here. We both have doubts about the validity of the idea Jackal was a two-timer." Doubts don't mean much, Lyndsey. We need evidence. Does it matter? He's dead. But whoever conspired with or against him is not. This means there's still a danger and need to be eliminated. Burke sipped his coffee, the bitter brew grounding him as he mulled over the implications. The briefcase, with its encrypted files on covert ops, was a ticking time bomb in the wrong hands. He set the mug down, his eyes locking onto Lyndsey's. "Why did you come to see me, Lyndsey?" "We've worked together on many assignments, Burke. At one time, there was even something between us. You're the only one I can trust." Her voice softened, and for a moment, Burke caught a glimpse of the woman he'd known in years past. A touching but dangerous attitude. "I'm serious. There are concerning things going on in the organization." Her words hung heavy, laced with a quiet dread that mirrored his own suspicions. "So why not do something about it?" "I need an ally." "And I'm it." Lyndsey gave him that pleading look, her eyes wide and unguarded, a look that had always unraveled him. He shifted uncomfortably, sensing the conversation veering into dangerous territory, and decided a quick change of subject was imperative. "I take it you haven't talked with the boss about this," he ventured. "No." Her voice was flat, and she didn't meet his eyes, her fingers tightening around her coffee mug. "You don't trust him either?" "I don't trust anyone, Burke." "Except me." "You were the least of the two evils." "Aw, I didn't know you still cared." Lyndsey laughed, a soft, fleeting sound that stirred old feelings, memories of late-night stakeouts and stolen moments in safe houses. For a moment, the diner's noise faded, and it was just the two of them. Darlene reappeared, breaking the spell with a slap of the check onto the table. "You want anything else?" Her tone suggested they damn well better not want anything else. "No thanks," Burke said, flashing a polite smile. "We're stuffed." The waitress wandered away, muttering under her breath. Lyndsey grabbed her handbag, a sleek black leather clutch that likely concealed a blade or worse, and slid from the booth. When Burke moved to follow, she waved him off. "I'll grab a cab." "I thought you trusted me." "The lesser of two evils is still evil." "And yet I'm guessing you expect me to pick up the check." "Oh, would you? Thanks. I'll grab it next time." She bent down, her lips brushing his cheek in a quick, teasing peck that left a faint warmth in his wake. Then she turned and walked from the diner, her silhouette cutting through the crowd with a grace that belied the danger she carried. Burke watched her go, his gaze lingering on the sway of her hips, a reflex he couldn't quite suppress. He sighed, reaching for his wallet, knowing he was beaten by her, by the situation, by the ghosts of their past. As he tossed a few bills onto the table, he couldn't shake the feeling that Lyndsey's visit had just pulled him into a game far deadlier than he'd anticipated. 3. By the time Burke pulled into his driveway, the gloomy morning sky had deepened into a brooding gray, heavy with the promise of an impending storm. The air was thick with humidity, and the towering maples lining his quiet street swayed in a deceptively lazy dance, their leaves rustling like whispers of warning before the tempest hit. The distant rumble of thunder underscored the tension as Burke stepped out of his car, its engine ticking as it cooled. He pushed through the front door, the faint scent of cedar and old books greeting him as he entered the dimly lit foyer. He had just closed and locked the heavy oak door behind him, the deadbolt sliding home with a satisfying click, when his eyes caught a glint of white against the hardwood floor. A small, unassuming envelope lay near the threshold. Burke's instincts kicked in, his pulse quickening as he bent to retrieve it, careful to grasp it by the edges to avoid smudging any potential prints. The envelope was plain, devoid of any address, stamp, or distinguishing mark, its flap unsealed and slightly curled. Holding it up to the weak light filtering through a nearby window, he discerned the faint outline of a single folded sheet inside. No wires, no powder, just paper. He reached inside, his fingers deftly opening the flap, and withdrew the sheet. The letterhead was unmistakable. From the office of J. Carlton Moore, with the embossed logo of Onyx Sector, the covert intelligence agency, centered at the top. Below it, the page was filled with row upon row of numbers, meticulously arranged in sets of 7, forming neat columns that spoke of a coded message. Burke's lips twitched in a wry half-smile. If the head of Onyx Sector is lowering himself to sending coded messages, he mumbled, his voice low in the silent house, it must be important. He crossed the living room, its sparse furnishings, a worn leather couch, a coffee table cluttered with dog-eared paperbacks, casting long shadows in the storm's dim light, and entered his office. Shutting the door behind him, he moved to the towering bookshelf that dominated one wall, its shelves sagging under the weight of classic literature and obscure espionage manuals. His fingers found the leather-bound spine of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, its gilt lettering faded from years of handling. He pulled it forward, reached into the narrow aperture behind it, and pressed a small green button hidden in the recess. A soft, efficient click echoed in the room, and the bookshelf slid aside with a faint hum, revealing a hidden chamber. The secret room was stark, its concrete walls unadorned save for an arsenal that would make any operative's heart race. Racks of weapons lined the space. Sleek Beretta handguns, suppressed Sig Sauer pistols, and a collection of automatic rifles that would draw raised eyebrows even in the shadiest black markets. A single overhead bulb cast a harsh glow over a steel workbench littered with tools and ammunition. Burke crossed to a heavy safe in the corner, its matte black surface unmarred by scratches or dents. Kneeling, he worked the combination with practiced precision, the tumblers clicking as the door swung open. Inside, among stacks of encrypted drives and dossiers, lay a small electronic device, its sleek design mimicking an iPhone down to the polished aluminum edges. Only a trained eye would notice the subtle differences, the lack of a camera lens, the thicker casing. Burke powered on the device, entering a 6-digit code with quick taps. A circular reader on the screen lit up, and he pressed his thumb against it, the device beeping once as it verified his identity. The display flashed a confirmation, ready to decipher Yeti encoded message. Onyx Sector's proprietary coding language, Yeti, was a labyrinth of algorithms known only to a select few. Burke held the device over the coded sheet, aligning it carefully. A soft beep sounded and the screen flickered, revealing the decoded message in crisp white text. Tiger. Events have transpired which demand your attention. Call me via secure phone at your earliest convenience. More. Burke knew that at your earliest convenience was Moore's polite way of saying right now. He logged back into the device, his fingers navigating the interface with the ease of muscle memory, and tapped in the code from Moore's direct line. The call connected after a single ring. "What the hell took you so long, Tiger?" Moore's gruff voice crackled through the speaker. "I was beginning to think you'd skipped the country." "Sorry, sir, I was detained earlier this morning," Burke said, thinking of Lyndsey's unexpected appearance in his car. "Well, no matter," Moore said, his tone softening, though it carried the weight of a man forgiving a near unpardonable sin. "I have received word from one of my field agents a man was blown up this morning by a briefcase bomb at the Starlight Inn." Burke's grip tightened on the device. "Briefcase bomb? Is this significant?" "Could be. The deceased was an agent affiliated with the terrorist group Scorpion. My man was in the act of surveillance when the bomb went off. Take a tip, Tiger. Never watch a large explosion through a pair of binoculars. almost blinded the poor guy. Imagine what happened to the man inside the room, Burke said, picturing the smoldering ruins of the motel room, the air thick with ash and the acrid stench of explosives. Oh, I have. Tiny pieces. Anyway, according to my man on surveillance, the Scorpion agent's schedule coincides with Jackal's. So it's possible Jackal was pulling some sort of double cross? Not the way I'd put it, but yes. This enemy agent had been on Jackal's tail for some time, and Jackal decided it was time to shake the guy. He contacted him and offered a deal. The deal was accepted, and they set a time and place to meet. Jackal was going to hand over the rigged briefcase and scram, leaving Scorpion with no lead on the whereabouts of the real prize. A good plan, Burke remarked, leaning against the workbench, his mind racing through the implications. Except it didn't work, Moore pointed out. True, Scorpion has lost an agent, but the briefcase is still wandering around somewhere unknown. I'm sure you sent someone to Jackal's apartment? It was my first move. The place was empty of briefcases, not even an overnight bag to be found. Did it look like it had been searched? Clean and neat. Looked like no one had lived there in a month. Burke frowned, picturing Jackal's upscale D.C. apartment, polished hardwood, minimalist furniture, the kind of place that screamed money and secrecy. Then it would appear we're back to square one. We never left square one, Tiger. As it was, I was certain Jackal had handed it over to an enemy organization. Now it could be anywhere. For all we know, Jackal hid it well before attempting the fake switch. What about his car? It was searched, but we found nothing. I have an agent going over Jackal's financial records to find out what banks he frequented. Perhaps he left it in a vault somewhere. That doesn't sound like his style, Burke said, recalling the man's flair for the dramatic. Well, we have to check all angles. Most likely, Scorpion got one step ahead of us, and the briefcase is in their possession. Where do I fit into all this? I want you in an active role on this, Tiger. It's fast becoming a major fiasco, and we need to get a handle on it before the unthinkable happens. Scorpion's presence in this country is relatively new, and we don't have many solid leads on them. However, we're certain they operate out of the Mediterranean area. We will try to stop them before they leave the country, but our intel on their North American operations is sparse. If they slip through our fingers, we'll need a player at home base to stop the run. That's where you come in. I want to warn you, Tiger, this won't be a cakewalk. Scorpion is a desperate organization. In the past, they've used both women and children as pawns in their power plays, so they'll have no qualms about laying you to rest. Think you can handle a vacation to Athens? Burke's lips quirked in a grim smile. A vacation I can handle. I'm not so thrilled about executions. Just make sure it isn't your execution, Moore growled, his voice like gravel. A man will be at your house at 4 o'clock this afternoon to pick you up. He'll pass along all the information you'll need. In the package of information will be a satellite phone. I'm expecting you to contact me with updates concerning the operation. I'm sending an agent to back you up. They'll contact you after your arrival in Athens. Don't worry about taking any weapons. That's all been taken care of. Your plane leaves this evening out of JFK, Delta Airlines Terminal 5. Be there. The line went dead. The silence in the hidden room was deafening. Burke powered down the device and slid it into his pocket, his mind already mapping out the logistics of the mission. He stepped back into the main office, the bookshelf sliding shut behind him with a soft thud. As he passed his desk, a cluttered mess of notepads and coffee mugs, his eyes fell on the wall calendar pinned above it. One date, circled in red, caught his attention, and he groaned. He'd promised to attend a night of barbecue and poker at Bill Carey's house in Georgetown, a standing invitation he'd dodged for months before finally caving. Canceling now at the last minute would not go over well. Sighing, he pulled out his phone, not the Onyx Sector device, but his personal cell, and dialed Bill's number. The call connected after 2 rings. Hey, Bill, I've got some things to do around here today, and then I'll be out of town for a while. I've got to catch a flight this afternoon out of JFK. Bill's voice came through, thick with irritation and skepticism. That sucks. When will you be back? I don't know. I'll let you know. Win some hands for me. I'll settle for winning my own. The good thing about you not attending is I might actually have a chance. Burke chuckled, despite the weight settling in his chest. Just keep those aces up your sleeves and you'll be fine. He ended the call, staring out the window as the first raindrops began to fall, streaking the glass like tears. 4. At precisely 4 p.m., Burke stood on the front porch of his home, his leather travel bag slung over one shoulder, the weight of it familiar and grounding. He scanned the street, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his baseball cap, waiting for the ride promised by J. Carlton Moore. At exactly 2 minutes past the hour, a battered yellow taxi screeched to a stop at the curb, its horn blaring with impatient urgency. The driver, a wiry man with a grizzled beard and a faded Mets cap, leaned out the window, his voice rough as gravel. Hurry it up, we're behind schedule. Idiot, Burke muttered under his breath, deliberately slowing his pace as he descended the porch steps, his boots crunching on the gravel path. The driver laid on the horn again, the sound piercing the heavy air. Burke reached the cab, yanked open the rear door, and tossed his bag onto the seat before sliding in after it. He hadn't even closed the door when the driver slammed the accelerator, the taxi lurching forward with a squeal of tires that pinned Burke back against the seat. His pulse spiked, and for a fleeting moment, he wondered if a cabal of bloodthirsty terrorists might be less dangerous than this maniac behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, he caught the driver's forehead creased with intense concentration, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead like a predator zeroing in on prey. Burke leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Hey, buddy. The driver ignored him, weaving through traffic with reckless precision. Would you mind slowing down a little? Shut up, the driver snapped, his tone as sharp as the screech of brakes as he swerved around a delivery van. Assuming his chauffeur was not in the mood for small talk, Burke sank back, gripping the armrest as the taxi barreled through stop signs, blew past red lights, and tore through quiet residential neighborhoods, the quaint bungalows and manicured lawns blurring into a kaleidoscope of suburban panic. When they hit the highway, the ride became a heart-pounding gauntlet of near collisions and high-speed lane changes. Burke decided his best strategy was to avoid looking out the window, focusing instead on the faded air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror, its pine scent long since overwhelmed by the stale odor of cigarette smoke. When he dared to glance up, the towering sign for John F. Kennedy International Airport loomed ahead, its neon letters a beacon of salvation. Burke exhaled a shaky breath, his shoulders loosening slightly. The driver checked his watch and let out a triumphant hoot. 18 minutes and 32 seconds. Burke wiped his sweaty palms on the thighs of his jeans, the denim cool against his skin. Is that good? Is that good? The cabbie shot him a look of pure disgust in the rearview mirror. Is it good? My best time from your part of town until today was 20 minutes flat. Shaking his head, he turned back to the road, muttering, Is it good? You mean to tell me you drove like a demon to break your own record? Burke's voice carried a mix of annoyance and disbelief, his life apparently worth less to this man than a personal best. The cabbie's expression remained unapologetic, his eyes glinting with the pride of a man who'd conquered time itself. They pulled up Terminal 5, the taxi jerking to a stop amidst a sea of travelers and honking horns. Berg grabbed his bag, his fingers brushing the familiar scuffs on its leather surface. He opened the door, but before he could step out, the driver bellowed, "Whoops, almost forgot. Fellow who called the taxi told me to give you this." He reached across to the passenger seat, retrieving a small package wrapped in nondescript brown paper and thrust it toward Burke. Burke took the package, tucking it under his arm to keep his hands free, a habit born of years in the field. He stepped out of the cab, hauling his bag with him. "Thanks for the—" The driver punched the gas, the taxi surged, slamming the rear door shut with a bang. "Ride," Burke finished, shaking his head as the cab vanished into the airport traffic. Inside the bustling terminal, Burke navigated the security checkpoint with practiced efficiency, his movements calm but deliberate, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. Once cleared, he made a beeline for the men's restroom, choosing the last stall for its relative privacy. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the chipped tiles. Locking the door, he set his bag on the floor and tore open the brown paper package, revealing a meticulously curated set of items for his cover identity, John Remus. There was a wallet containing a New York driver's license bearing his photo and the name John Remus, a stack of business cards proclaiming him a representative of the Apple Ridge Insurance Agency, a bundle of euros equivalent to $2,500, two credit cards embossed with his alias, and a small stack of family photos. Burke flipped through the photos, his lips twitching in a wry smile. "The wife and kids," he mused. The back of each photo was inscribed with names: Lisa, his supposed wife, and their children, Taylor, age 5, and Ashley, age 4. The kids were adorable. Taylor with a gap-toothed grin, Ashley clutching a stuffed bunny, almost convincing enough to make Burke wish the cover were real. Tucked among the items were his airline tickets for the Delta flight to Athens. He distributed the contents methodically, slipping his real wallet into a zippered pocket of his carry-on and sliding the new one into his back pocket. He crumpled the brown paper into a tight ball, ready to step out, when the restroom door swung open and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed. Two men by the cadence. Burke froze, backing silently to the rear of the stall. He eased onto the toilet seat, propping his feet against the side wall to avoid detection, and pulled his travel bag onto his lap, clutching it like a shield. The door closed and the men's footsteps stopped. "Is it empty?" one asked, his voice low and clipped, with a faint Eastern European accent. Burke heard scuffling, the sound of someone bending to check under the stall doors. "Yeah, it's empty," the other replied, his tone gruffer, American. "Have you seen him yet?" "Not a sign. By my watch, he should board in half an hour." "A damn shame he didn't mention the terminal. That would have been too easy. Let's get out there again and meet back here in 30, unless one of us spots him." The footsteps retreated and the door swung shut. Burke waited a beat, then eased open the stall's latch and peered out, catching a glimpse of the men as they exited. Both were of medium height, but powerfully built, their movements purposeful. The first, blonde-haired and tanned, wore a light brown suit that strained slightly at the shoulders. The second, with close-cropped dark hair and glasses, was dressed in a gray suit, his posture rigid. The door closed, cutting them off from view. Burke counted to 10, then stepped to the restroom door and peered into the corridor. The dark-haired man was strolling to the right, while the blonde had taken the left passageway. Burke's eyes caught a sign overhead, Terminal 5, with an arrow pointed right. He hoisted his bag and followed the dark-haired man at a cautious distance, his mind racing. Had they been talking about him? If so, how had they known his plans? A cold chill snaked up his spine as he recalled Lyndsey's visit to his bathroom that morning. Her request had seemed innocent, but she'd taken longer than necessary, long enough to plant a listening device in his home. The thought twisted like a knife, her earlier words about trust now ringing hollow. He spotted the entrance to Terminal 5 ahead, the dark-haired man ducking inside. Burke slowed, slipping behind a newspaper kiosk, its racks cluttered with tabloids and travel magazines. He kept his eyes on the terminal entrance, glancing back to ensure the blonde hadn't doubled back. After a minute, the dark-haired man reappeared, scanned the corridor, and continued on. Burke waited a few seconds before moving toward the terminal, where a throng of travelers offered a measure of safety in numbers. He checked in at the Delta counter, his movements casual but his senses on high alert, then wove through the crowd to a bench with a clear view of the terminal and the adjacent corridor. Sometime later, the blond man entered the terminal, his eyes sweeping the crowd with predatory focus. Burke picked up a crumpled newspaper left by a hairy traveler and feigned interest in the headlines, his peripheral vision locked on the man. As the blonde drew closer, scanning faces, he stopped just a few feet away, his gaze landing on Burke. For a moment, their eyes met. Then the man turned away, raising a hand to his mouth as if stifling a cough, more likely speaking into a concealed comms device to signal his partner. The first boarding announcement crackled over the intercom. Burke rose, gathering his bag, and joined the line for the jetway. Ahead of him, a young couple lingered, their farewell drawn out with whispered promises and lingering touches. Burke suppressed the urge to tap them on the shoulder and snap, "Your outpouring of love and affection is touching, but there are two gentlemen who have adopted killing me as their burning passion in life." Instead, he kept his eyes forward, his posture relaxed despite the tension coiling in his gut. The couple shared one last ardent embrace before parting, the young woman stepping toward the jetway with Burke close behind. She paused every few steps to turn and blow kisses to her partner, who grinned and returned them with equal fervor. Burke allowed himself one final glance back and saw his two pursuers standing in the terminal, their faces etched with frustration as they watched him disappear into the plane. Their evident displeasure was a small victory, but as he boarded the flight to Athens, Burke knew the real danger was only beginning. 5. Burke settled into his seat on the Delta flight to Athens, the hum of the airliner's engines a steady backdrop as he reached down between his feet to retrieve the packet of information from Moore. Tucked inside a separate manila envelope, he found a set of reservations for the Astor Hotel, a four-star establishment nestled in the vibrant heart of Athens, just a half block from the bustling Syntagma Square. The accompanying brochure boasted glossy images of marble-floored lobbies and elegant rooms, promising balconies on the upper floors, with sweeping views of the Acropolis's ancient columns to one side and the verdant slopes of Mount Lycabettus to the other. Burke scanned every detail, from the amenities list to the fine print, noting the hotel's 24-hour concierge service, committing it all to memory. He glanced at his watch. 9:12 p.m. New York time. 9 hours remained until landing. His eyes drifted to a man 2 rows ahead on the opposite side of the plane, partially obscured by the dim cabin lighting. The man, in his mid-40s with thinning brown hair and a nondescript gray blazer, seemed unremarkable, except for the way he kept stealing glances in Burke's direction. Each time Burke met his gaze, the man hastily buried his nose in a tattered paperback, its cover too worn to read. Another Scorpion agent? Burke's instincts prickled, but the man's behavior was subtle, lacking the overt menace of a trained operative. Still, Burke kept him in his peripheral vision, tracking his movements until the weight of exhaustion pulled him under, and he dozed off, lulled by the drone of the engines. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the final approach to Athens International Airport. The plane descended smoothly, touching down with a gentle thud. As it taxied to the terminal, passengers stirred, groaning as they stretched cramped muscles after the long transatlantic flight. Burke gathered his travel bag and joined the sluggish procession through the crowded aisle. The man from 2 rows up had risen earlier and was already disappearing through the jetway door, his gray blazer blending into the sea of travelers. Burke followed at a cautious distance, trying to keep him in sight while weaving through the throng. Perhaps he was being overly suspicious. The man's glances could be mere coincidence, and he showed no urgency to track Burke in return. Deciding to let him go, Burke exited the terminal, where a shuttle bus to central Athens was just pulling up. He boarded, sinking into a worn seat for the ride into the city. The ride to the Astor Hotel was uneventful, the bus winding through Athens streets, past tavernas, spilling laughter and the scent of grilled souvlaki into the air. As promised by the brochure, Burke's room was pristine, its crisp white linens and polished wooden floors exuding quiet luxury. He crossed to the balcony, sliding open the glass door to reveal a breathtaking view of the Acropolis, its floodlit ruins glowing golden against the night sky. Burke checked his phone for nearby car rental agencies. He found one just a few blocks from the hotel, a small outfit called Hellenic Wheels. The streets of Athens were alive with evening crowds, tourists snapping photos, and locals weaving through on scooters. Burke navigated the bustling sidewalks with ease, his cover as John Remus, insurance agent, feeling like a second skin. At the agency, he presented his new credit card, which cleared without issue, and was handed the keys to a red VW Polo. It wasn't his dream car, but its compact size suited the narrow streets, and he drove away with a sense of independence. Relying on public transportation during a mission was a recipe for disaster. A sharp crack shattered his thoughts, the sound like a firecracker in the confined space of the car. Burke instinctively swerved to the right, tires squealing as he fought to keep control. His eyes darted to the driver's side window, where a small circular hole had appeared, surrounded by a web of spiderweb cracks radiating outward. Following the bullet's trajectory, he glanced to the passenger door. The window remained intact, but the handle was shattered, dangling by a single screw. For a fleeting moment, Burke's training warred with an insane urge to stop and hunt the shooter, but with no clue as to the shot's origin, rooftop, alley, or passing vehicle, exiting the car would only make him a sitting duck. He slammed his foot on the gas, the Polo's engine roaring as he sped toward the Astor, weaving through traffic with the precision of a man who dodged death before. He reached the hotel, abandoning the damaged car in the valet lot, and hurrying through the marble lobby to the elevator. His room felt like a sanctuary as he stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. But before he could catch his breath, a shadow loomed in the corner of his vision. Burke wheeled around just as a large fist swung toward him. He rolled his head with the blow, the knuckles grazing his cheekbone with a force that sent a jolt of pain through his skull. The glancing hit spared him a knockout, but stars danced in his vision. He stumbled back, buying time, but his attacker pressed forward, a dark silhouette against the room's soft lighting. Burke sized him up, lean and muscular, clad in a sleeveless black t-shirt and faded jeans, his head wrapped in a stained red bandana that failed to tame shoulder-length black hair. A patchy beard shadowed his face, but a jagged white scar running along his left cheek stood out, a stark contrast to his olive skin. The man lunged again, and Burke countered with a sweeping left hook, catching him across the jaw. The attacker staggered sideways, his face contorted in pain, but Burke's follow-up was cut short by a sharp punch to his midriff. Nausea surged, threatening to buckle his knees, but Burke fought to stay focused. The man pressed his advantage, landing two quick jabs to Burke's torso. Gasping, Burke dropped to his knees, the air driven from his lungs. A booted foot lashed out, catching him in the chest and sending him sprawling backward, the carpet rough against his palms. Through tunneling vision, he saw the man loom over him. Burke rolled onto his side, desperation fueling his movements. He pushed off the floor, lunging upward, only to be met with a crushing blow to the face. Blood stung his eyes, warm and coppery, blurring his vision. He knew it was over. Another kick sent him crashing back to the floor, his body twisting onto his stomach. Something rough, a cord or wire, slipped over his head, cinching tightly around his throat. The pressure was relentless, his head pounding as if it might burst. Burke clawed at the cord, his strength ebbing, his vision darkening. A muffled pop cut through the roaring in his ears, followed by a guttural grunt from his attacker. The pressure on his throat eased, then vanished as the cord was torn away. Burke collapsed, gasping, each breath a lifeline as oxygen flooded his lungs. He rolled over, squinting through blood and haze, and saw an indistinct figure kneeling beside him. Another form, his attacker, lay sprawled across his legs, motionless. Burke shoved the body off, sitting up and wiping blood from his eyes with the back of his hand. He blinked, his vision clearing, and focused on his rescuer's face. 6. Burke struggled to his feet, his chest still heaving from the near strangulation, the carpet rough beneath his palms. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, stinging as it mingled with sweat. He steadied himself against the hotel room's polished wooden dresser, the distant glow of the Acropolis through the balcony window casting long shadows across the floor. "Lyndsey?" he rasped, his voice raw as he met the piercing eyes of Lyndsey Archer. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Is that any way to greet someone who saved your life?" Lyndsey's tone was sharp, but laced with a familiar, dry humor. Burke rubbed his tender neck, the skin already bruising where the cord had bitten into it. "I'd have gotten out of it. I was waiting for the right moment." "The right moment? You just about had your last moment." Lyndsey laid her suppressed pistol on the bed, its sleek silencer catching the dim light. She crossed her arms, her posture relaxed but vigilant, her eyes scanning the room for any further threats. Burke grunted, conceding the point. "All right, fine. Thank you." "You're welcome. And the name is Venus to you, Tiger." He raised an eyebrow, the code names a stark reminder of their shared world of shadows. "I take it you're my backup agent?" "Is that a problem?" "Not for me. Why would it be?" Burke studied her, noting the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched as if itching to reach for the gun again. Lyndsey shrugged, her expression uneasy, a rare crack in her usual composure. "It's because of what happened, isn't it?" Burke said, stepping closer, his voice softening. "What happened is in the past. I never lost confidence in your ability as an agent. It wasn't your fault. I don't blame you. Are we good?" Lyndsey's gaze flickered, then she nodded, her jaw tightening. "We're good." "Good, because I'm standing next to a corpse with blood all over my face, and the door is standing wide open." Burke crossed the room, his boots silent on the plush carpet, and pushed the heavy door shut, the lock clicking with finality. He turned back to Lyndsey, wiping blood from his brow with the back of his hand. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "Next door. The two rooms even connect, so we won't have to be seen out in the hall whenever we want to compare notes." She gestured toward a discreet connecting door, its brass handle gleaming faintly in the low light. Burke shifted uncomfortably, the mention of connecting rooms stirring up memories. He coughed, pushing the thoughts aside. "Did Moore give you any further instructions about how to proceed?" "Wait until all of our party is present and complete the mission in any way necessary." "I suppose we're ready to roll." "Not quite." Who's left? A man named Andre. He's a local. Moore thought we needed someone who knew the territory. Burke leaned against the dresser, his mind cataloging the variables. Do you know anything about this guy? I've worked with him, once during the Slovakia incident and again 2 years ago in Rome. How did he operate? He seemed proficient. The groups we worked with were larger and not as closely knit as this one will be, so I didn't get to know him well, but he caused no problems or jeopardized the mission. Lindsay's voice was steady, but Burke caught the careful choice of words, the operative's instinct to reveal only what was necessary. I assume Moore briefed you on the situation. About as much as he told you, I'd imagine. Not a lot, just outlined the objective. Oh, and he also made it a point to keep him informed about the progress of the mission. Burke nodded, his gaze drifting to the body on the floor, the scar-faced attacker, now a lifeless heap, twin bullet holes in his back, oozing dark blood onto the carpet. Speaking of the mission, we have a slight problem. Lindsay followed his gaze, her expression unperturbed. I'm sure we can find a way to dispose of him. I was thinking more about why it seems every thug in Athens is already privy to our presence. On my way to the hotel a while ago, someone attempted to use my head for a skeet shoot. I had to play hide and seek with two goons at JFK Airport, and I suspect I was being observed during the flight. Obviously, my presence in Athens is no secret. How could they know? Lindsay's brow furrowed, her mind clearly working through the same puzzle. And that is the question of the hour. Was Andre privy to this information? Moore briefed Andre and me together, and he mentioned nothing. Unless they spoke later, Andre was in the dark. How did you know? Burke watched her face closely, searching for any flicker of deception. Lindsay didn't flinch, her eyes steady as they met his. Moore told me later. We had a more detailed chat after Andre left. He told me who I was to meet with and said you would be staying in the room next to mine. And you haven't had any welcoming committees appear on your proverbial doorstep? Lindsay shrugged, a casual gesture that belied the tension in her posture. I guess they aren't as well informed about my movements as they are yours. You probably didn't have a listening device planted in your home either. Lindsay's eyes widened, her surprise seeming genuine, though Burke knew she could mask her true intentions with the best of them. A bug? I believe that's how those two men at the airport knew when to look for me, because I had a conversation with a friend earlier that day and told him I'd be flying out of town from JFK, but I didn't tell him which terminal. You didn't know about the bug? You think I had something to do with it? Lindsay's voice took on a cool edge, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. You had the perfect opportunity. Why the hell would I plant a listening device in your house? You're not nearly as interesting as you seem to think you are. Maybe to find out where I was going and what my plans were. You said the two men who knew about your plans because of the bug didn't know your terminal. I did. Really? Terminal 5. Moore gave Andre and me our tickets at the meeting. Your information was lying on the desk. I took the liberty of reading it, Mr. Remus. She smirked, a playful glint in her eyes that briefly softened the tension. Burke grinned, despite himself. I'm also married and have 2 kids. I hope the wife doesn't find out that we're alone together in a hotel room. That makes it all the more exciting. Or it would if I weren't so pissed at you for assuming the worst about me. Sorry. Any way I can make it up to you? I'll let you know. I can't wait, Burke said, his tone light but his mind still churning. But seriously, I'm glad you haven't had any incidents since you arrived. Hang around me, though, and you will. When is this Andre fellow supposed to arrive? He's staying at the Electra Palace, but he was supposed to meet me here. Well, as soon as he arrives, I suggest he come up with a plan of action. When it gets dark, we can do something about our unwanted guest." At that moment, Lyndsey held up a hand for silence, her head tilting toward the connecting door. "I thought I heard someone knocking on the door to my room. That may be Andre." She moved swiftly to the door, unlocking it with a soft click and cracking it open to peer down the hall. After a moment, she opened it wider and motioned to someone out of sight. Stepping aside, she allowed the newcomer to enter. Burke's eyes widened as Andre stepped into the room, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. The man was a colossus, towering well over 6 feet, with a thick neck that melded seamlessly into massive shoulders. His chest was a broad expanse, flanked by arms that rippled with muscle beneath a fitted black shirt. Despite his bodybuilder's physique, Andre moved with a surprising grace, his wide, flat face breaking into a warm grin that revealed large white teeth. His eyes sparkled with an almost boyish enthusiasm as he spotted Burke standing beside Lyndsey. "Our contact?" he asked, his voice carrying a faint Greek accent, rich and resonant. Lyndsey nodded. "This is Mr. Burke, or as he will be known on assignment, John Remus." Andre stepped forward and extended a meaty hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Burke. I am Andre." Burke clasped the offered hand, wincing as Andre's grip tightened, threatening to grind his bones to dust. In a desperate bid to preserve his hand, Burke squeezed back, but it only seemed to encourage Andre's vice-like hold. Just as Burke considered begging for mercy, Andre released him, stepping back with a grin. "You have a strong grip, Mr. Burke. We should arm wrestle sometime." Burke laughed shakily, flexing his throbbing fingers. "I'm glad you arrived. We have quite a bit of work to do." "Including a way to get this body out of the room," Lyndsey added, gesturing to the corpse sprawled on the carpet, its blood now seeping into the fibers. Andre glanced down, his expression calm as he noted the twin bullet holes in the man's back. "It should not be difficult." "We'll have to wait until dark, of course," Lyndsey said, her tone practical. Andre waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. I have an extra-large gym bag at my hotel. I will get it and bring it back here. Then we put the body inside and I carry it out." Burke frowned, his mind racing through the logistics. "A gym bag? Are you sure the body will fit?" "We will make it fit," Andre said, his voice carrying an ominous certainty that sent a shiver down Burke's spine. "If you say so," Burke replied, unconvinced. "Be sure to arrive with something inside the bag. We don't want anyone watching this hotel to see you come in with an empty bag and leave with a full one." Andre nodded, his grin unwavering, and turned to leave, his heavy footsteps muffled by the carpet. Lyndsey locked the door behind him and turned to Burke, her expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Well, what do you think?" "A good friend to have in a dark alley, but a bad one to shake hands with," Burke said, massaging his aching hand. "I'll never play the violin again." "You don't play the violin." "And now I never will." 7. While Andre was off disposing of the body, a process neither Burke nor Lyndsey had any desire to delve into, they slipped out of the Astor Hotel and made their way down the bustling streets of Athens. The evening air was thick with the promise of rain, the distant rumble of thunder mingling with the chatter of tourists and the clatter of tavernas preparing for the dinner rush. They retraced Burke's route to the spot where the assassination attempt had occurred, the narrow street lined with a mix of modern storefronts and weathered stone buildings. Burke stopped at a point in the road, the asphalt still bearing faint tire marks from his earlier swerve. He pointed to the spot, his voice steady but tinged with irritation. "It was right about here. I was driving along, minding my own business, bothering no one, when some insensitive lout took a shot at me." Lyndsey scanned the surrounding buildings, her green eyes narrowing as she assessed the terrain. I suppose it would be impractical to search each of these buildings, she said, her tone pragmatic, but it would be useful to know where the shooter was hiding. We might narrow it down. Burke gestured toward the damaged VW Polo parked haphazardly nearby, its driver's side window a shattered web of cracks around a neat bullet hole. The bullet took a straight path through the window, since the hole in the glass and the mangled door handle are across from one another, save a slight downward angle. If I was about right there, and I believe I was, he pointed to the exact spot in the street where he'd been driving. The shot should have come from one of these buildings. His arm swept across three structures: a mid-tier hotel with a faded marquee, a lively restaurant spilling the scent of grilled octopus into the air, and a cramped souvenir shop cluttered with postcards and miniature Parthenon replicas. The bullet traveled downward through the window, so the shooter must have been at a higher elevation than I was. The souvenir shop only has one level, so we can scratch it out. There are two levels to the restaurant, so that's a possibility, and there's always the hotel. Lyndsey tilted her head, considering. I wonder how likely it is the shooter could make his way to the second floor of the restaurant without being spotted. Not very, Burke replied, picturing the restaurant's open layout, its bustling waitstaff and crowded tables offering little cover for a sniper. The hotel has 4 floors. Burke nodded, his mind mapping the trajectory. Right, and we can forget the top floor, too high. The bullet would have gone through the roof at that height. I'm estimating the second floor. They entered the hotel, a modest establishment with a lobby of worn marble floors and faded tapestries depicting ancient Greek myths. The elevator creaked as it carried them to the second floor, its doors opening to a dimly lit hallway lined with numbered rooms. Burke moved methodically, pausing at each alcove to peer through the narrow windows overlooking the street below. He visualized the red VW Polo navigating the road, the bullet's path etched in his memory. Halfway down the hall, he stopped in an alcove with a clear view of the spot where he'd been shot at. In his mind's eye, he saw the car, its position relative to the buildings. Raising his arm, he extended his forefinger like a makeshift sight line aiming downward. He nodded, satisfied. I'd say it's either the room to the left or to the right of where we're standing. He glanced at the two doors flanking the alcove, noting their numbers, 216 and 218. Motioning for Lyndsey to follow, he retraced their steps to the elevator, the faint hum of the city filtering through the walls. Back in the lobby, Burke approached the reception desk, where a clerk with slicked back hair and a bored expression stood flipping through a magazine. "Excuse me," Burke said, flashing his most disarming smile, the one he'd perfected during years of charming, reluctant informants. "I was wondering if you could tell me who was staying in rooms 216 and 218. The clerk barely looked up, his voice flat. "I'm sorry, but I cannot give out that information." Burke sighed, reaching for the wallet tucked in his back pocket, his cover identity as John Remus feeling like a second skin. He slid a few euros across the polished counter, raising his eyebrows expectantly. The clerk's eyes flicked to the bills, his expression unchanging. Burke added more, the stack growing under the clerk's impassive stare. Still nothing. "Oh, go to hell," Burke muttered, tossing 2 more bills onto the pile. "That's all you're getting." The clerk sniffed, gathering the money with a practiced swipe. "No one is staying in either room." "Vacant?" "There was a man in 218 earlier today, but he is no longer there." "When did he check out?" A flicker of anger crossed the clerk's face, his thin lips tightening. "Earlier today I left the desk for a few minutes, and when I came back, the key for room 218 was lying on the desk. I checked the computer and discovered he still owed the hotel money." "How long had he been staying here?" "The room was reserved for him a day or two ago, but he arrived to occupy it today. He stayed such a short time and then he left. Could you describe this man? My memory is terrible. Burke's jaw clenched, but he held his temper. Nice try, pal, but you already broke the bank. This man is wanted by the authorities. It would be in your best interest to cooperate. The threat backfired. The clerk's face reddened, his shoulders hunching like a bull preparing to charge. Why should I help? What is in it for me? Burke ground his teeth, but reached for his wallet again, pulling out the John Remus credit card and waving it in front of the clerk's face. If I pay the bill, will you give me a good description? The clerk eyed the card suspiciously, then snatched it, running it through the reader with a skeptical frown. Satisfied, he nodded and processed the transaction. He was a little man with a small black mustache, not a Greek, too dark. What name did he give? The clerk consulted the register, his fingers tapping on the keyboard. He looked up, his voice flat. His name was Mr. J. Carlton Moore. Well, that was productive, Lyndsey said as they stepped out into the humid Athenian air, the air thick with the scent of impending rain. At least we know he has a sense of humor. Burke's mind churned, the clerk's revelation gnawing at him. The man sounds like the one who was watching me during my flight. I lost sight of him once we landed, and it wouldn't surprise me if he came straight here to wait for me. But how would they know which hotel you were staying at? Lyndsey's brow furrowed, her hands shoved into the pockets of her leather jacket. Burke's thoughts raced, the string of near misses and ambushes forming a troubling pattern. These weren't coincidences, they were orchestrated. He hadn't mentioned his hotel to anyone, not Bill Carey, not even Moore in their last call. The two men at JFK had known he was flying out, but not which terminal, suggesting fragmented intelligence. Yet the shooter here in Athens had known exactly where to find him. Would Scorpion, or whoever is behind this, leave what happened up to chance? He mused aloud, his voice low. I doubt it. I can understand how the two men found out about my plane and airport because I mentioned that to Bill Carey. However, I said nothing about which hotel I'd be staying at or which flight I was taking. If the man on my plane knew which flight to take, why didn't the two others at JFK know which terminal I'd be flying from? Surely they would have traded information, unless there was more than one faction working toward the same goal. The idea crystallized, chilling him. He turned to Lyndsey, his expression grim. Do you remember our talk about Jackal not being the mole? Lyndsey nodded, her eyes sharp with understanding. I think we were both right and wrong, Burke said, his voice steady but urgent. Jackal wasn't a mole. I think his death proved that. However, it appears there is a mole somewhere in the organization, someone who has access to classified information. Information they're passing to Scorpion? Maybe, but maybe not. Perhaps it's not only Onyx, Sector, and Scorpion who are interested in this case. Someone else has thrown their hat into the ring. The tough part is going to be figuring out who. And who belongs to whom, Lyndsey added, her tone mirroring his unease. We have no way of knowing if the assassin was a Scorpion man or if he belonged to this other group, assuming there is one. In addition, what about the men after you at the airport? Who were they working for? Those are questions we're going to have to answer. And soon. Burke ran his fingers through his hair, the weight of the mission pressing down on him. I want to ask you to do something. Will you? Will it get me into trouble? I want you to suspend your reports to Moore. Suspend them? Why? Not suspend them exactly. Make them as general as possible. Don't give specifics, such as where you're planning to be or what information you've gathered. Give him enough to keep him quiet, and I'll do the same. Lyndsey's eyes narrowed, searching his face. You don't trust him, do you? The stakes are too high at this stage of the game, Lyndsey. Things are happening that should have no way of occurring, at least not this quickly. I'm not accusing Moore of anything, but until we know for sure, I'm asking you to cooperate with me on this." Lyndsey nodded slowly, her jaw tight. "I don't like it, but I agree. One more thing. Mention none of this to Andre. Neither of us knows him well, and the fewer people who know what our real plans are, the better." 8. Burke lay awake in his room at the Astor Hotel, the distant glow of the Acropolis filtering through the balcony curtains, casting faint patterns across the ceiling. The plush bed beneath him offered little comfort as his mind churned, replaying the day's events. The sniper's bullet, the brutal attack in his room, Lyndsey's timely intervention. Sleep eluded him, his thoughts tangled in a web of suspicion and strategy. He felt like a worm for distrusting Lyndsey, but the circumstances left him no choice. Her satellite phone, identical to his own, meant she'd be filing separate reports to Moore, a setup that screamed quality control. By comparing their accounts, Moore could sniff out discrepancies. Did that mean Moore didn't trust them either? The thought gnawed at Burke, a splinter in his mind. And what of his own doubts about Moore? As the head of Onyx Sector, J. Carlton Moore could have orchestrated Burke's demise 1,000 simpler ways. Poison in his coffee, a staged accident, a quiet knife in an alley. This elaborate game of cat and mouse felt too convoluted for a direct betrayal from the top. Yet the security leak was undeniable, a gaping wound in the organization. Someone was feeding information to their enemies. But the more Burke turned it over, the less he believed Lyndsey or Moore were the culprits. The realization brought a flicker of relief. He wanted desperately to trust them, especially Lyndsey, whose shared history with him was both a strength and a vulnerability. Was his hope clouding his judgment, dulling the edge of his instincts? He couldn't afford to let it. The next morning, Burke met Lyndsey outside the hotel, the Athenian sun already warm despite the early hour. The streets buzzed with life, scooters weaving through traffic, vendors hawking fresh bread, and tourists snapping photos. Lyndsey stood by the hotel's entrance, her leather jacket traded for a lightweight blazer, her hair catching the light. "Are you ready for a little jaunt around Athens?" Burke asked, his tone light but his eyes scanning the crowd for threats. Lyndsey grimaced, adjusting her sunglasses. "As long as it's a little jaunt, I'm starved." "Have you spoken to Andre?" "No. He informed me never to contact him early except in an emergency. I'm getting the idea Athenians like to stay up late." "If so, it doesn't stop them from getting up early." Burke gestured at the bustling street, where cars honked and pedestrians hurried past, their voices a lively cacophony. He started walking, his pace brisk, and Lyndsey followed, her reluctance evident in her measured steps. "Where are we going?" "I told you, a little jaunt." They passed the imposing Parliament building, its marble columns gleaming under the morning sun, and took Vasilis Sophias, the wide boulevard flanked by stately trees and elegant storefronts. Turning onto Kambari, they reached Kolonaki Square, a chic enclave where well-dressed locals sipped coffee at sidewalk cafes. Burke nodded toward a cozy establishment with wicker chairs and checkered tablecloths. "Let's stop in for a bite to hold us over till we can eat something more substantial." They settled at a table shaded by a striped awning, ordering strong Greek coffee and a plate of lucamares, the honey-drizzled pastries a sweet escape. Burke leaned back, a half-smile playing on his lips as he studied Lyndsey. She frowned, catching his expression. "Are you laughing at me?" "Not at all. I was thinking about your code name." "What about it? You don't like it?" "I think it suits you. Venus, the goddess of love. What does that make Andre? Mars, the god of war?" "He is kind of intimidating, isn't he? His code name is Cicero." "Venus, Tiger, and Cicero," Burke mused, swirling his coffee. Sounds like a formidable team. I'd settle for successful. Burke started to respond, but his voice dropped, his eyes flicking to the table beside them. The paper, he said, his tone low and urgent. Hand me the newspaper on the table next to you. Lindsay's brow furrowed, but she complied, passing him a folded copy of Catherine. What is... Burke handed her a section of the paper, his movements casual but deliberate. Start reading. They sat in silence, the rustle of pages blending with the chatter of nearby patrons. After a few moments, Burke lowered his paper, his gaze sweeping the square. Lyndsey folded hers, her voice sharp. What the hell was that about? Develop a sudden craving for world news? Sorry, I looked down the street and saw two people I'd rather not meet right now. Who? Well, they looked a lot like the two goons who tried to make my acquaintance at JFK. Lindsay's eyes narrowed, scanning the crowd. Are you still thinking there are three groups at work? Burke sat quietly, his fingers drumming on the table as he weighed his next move. The mission's tangled threads, Jackal's death, the missing briefcase, the relentless attacks, demanded clarity. He leaned forward, his voice low. Lyndsey, I'm going to put all my cards on the table. Meaning you haven't so far? Something like that. I was awake for a long while last night, pondering this little mission of ours, as was I, and I've realized I'm going to have to make a decision. Me too. Would you stop interrupting me? Sorry. Anyway, as I was saying, a decision not entirely comfortable for me. Burke paused, half expecting another interruption, but Lindsay's eyes were steady, urging him to continue. I've had a difficult time trusting anyone, including you. He recounted the restless hours he'd spent wrestling with his suspicions, the nagging fear of a mole, the possibility of multiple factions vying for the briefcase. As a result, I've concluded that if this mission will be successful, I'll need help. Moore is too far away, and I know nothing of Andre. Lyndsey nodded, her expression softening. I've had my own questions about the mission and the people involved in it. I could have been the one doing the talking here this morning instead of you. We can't let distrust divide the team, Burke. Even Andre? Even Andre. Moore must have some level of confidence in him, and so far, he's given us no reason to suspect him. Burke cradled his coffee cup, the ceramic warm against his palms as he swirled the dark liquid. You realize what the problem here is, don't you? The rampant distrust, I mean. Lyndsey remained silent, her gaze dropping to the table. It's what happened the last time we were on a mission together. As expected, she lowered her eyes, her shoulders tensing. Burke, must we? Yes, I think we must. It's been hanging over our heads since we had breakfast at the diner back in the States. It's always there, and it won't go away until we get it out in the open. I know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're right, You feel guilty, don't you? I know you don't blame me, Burke. You said that, but I can't get away from the idea that if I had done things a little differently, you had no way of knowing. You didn't even know he was in the area. If anyone should feel guilty, it's those clowns over at communications. They should have informed you that a friendly was in your sector. Stu wouldn't want this for you. Lyndsey didn't respond, her silence heavy with the weight of memory. They both knew the story, etched in pain and loss. 2 years ago, in a dimly lit safe house in Damascus, Lyndsey had been on surveillance, tracking a high-ranking Scorpion operative. A cryptic message from Onyx sector warned that her cover was blown, putting her in immediate danger. As she packed her gear to flee, two men burst through the door. In the chaos, her nerves frayed and visibility poor, she'd opened fire, cutting them down. One was Stuart Bentley, Burke's friend and a top Onyx sector operative, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The investigation had been a whitewash, labeling the incident a regrettable error in judgment for all parties concerned. Burke had been livid, railing against the vague findings that shielded the real culprits, likely a failure in the communications chain high up in the ranks. For Lyndsey, the aftermath was a prison of guilt and self-recrimination. Few agents blamed her. They all knew their razor-thin margin for error in their world, where split-second decisions in hostile environments could mean life or death. Her final message had warned of an imminent threat. What else could she have done when two armed men stormed her position? Since the entire incident had been shoved under the proverbial rug, Burke suspected the real error had been made high in the ranks, and the investigation had been one enormous covering of collective asses. As they sat in the cafe, the weight of that shared history hung between them, a silent acknowledgment that trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. But the mission demanded it, and Burke knew they had no choice but to move forward together. 9. Burke stood at the edge of Kolonaki Square, the vibrant pulse of Athens swirling around him. He scanned the crowded street, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cap. "Do you see those two men?" Lyndsey's voice cut in, her voice low to avoid drawing attention. Burke followed her gaze and shook his head. "No, they disappeared on the other side of the square. I should have followed them. It might have given us a lead, and goodness knows we need one." "It's a long shot," Lyndsey said, her eyes scanning the throng. "But we could walk down the way they went, perhaps even split up." Burke's hand instinctively patted the empty spot under his left arm, where his holster usually sat. "I wish I had a weapon. Without one, I feel unclothed." Lyndsey's lips curved into a sly grin. "I have clothes for you at the hotel. You remember the huge duffel bag Andre used to dispose of the body?" Burke nodded. "We were out interrogating that poor hotel clerk when Andre put the bag into action." "Yes, and you told him to make sure the bag looked full and heavy when he brought it in. The inbound freight wasn't simply junk." They retraced their steps to the Astor Hotel, the marble lobby cool and quiet after the bustling square. In Lyndsey's room, she unzipped the duffel, revealing a cache of equipment. Burke's eyes lit up as she handed him a Heckler & Koch USP, its matte black finish gleaming faintly in the light filtering through the balcony. He turned it over in his hands, checking the weight and balance, then nodded approvingly. "It will do," he said, sliding the pistol into a leather shoulder holster buried at the bottom of the pile. "Thorough as usual," he added, surveying the assortment of gear, knives, comms device, and surveillance tools. "Most of this stuff we'll never use," Lyndsey said, her tone practical as she sorted through the equipment. "But better to have artillery you don't need than wish you had it later." Burke bent down, retrieving two compact devices, each the size of a driver's license, their sleek design belying their utility. "Maybe we should take these along," he said, passing one of the two-way radios to Lyndsey. "Neither of us knows this city well." They split up at the hotel's entrance, the morning sun casting long shadows across the cobblestones. "We'll report every few minutes and give our position," Burke said, his voice firm. "That way the other person will know where to go looking. Got your map?" Lyndsey nodded, patting the folded map tucked into her blazer pocket. The chances of finding the two men were slim, but Burke knew that sometimes you had to stir the pot to get results. At the 15-minute mark, he pressed the call button on his radio, and Lyndsey's voice crackled through instantly. "Nothing so far," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "There is some great tourist stuff around here, though." "Where are you?" "In the Placa, standing outside the Hellenic Children's Museum." "Okay, I've got your position. Ready for mine?" He heard the rustle of paper as she unfolded her map. "Ready." "I'm outside the War Museum on Vasilisa Sophias." There was a pause as she located the spot. "Okay, I've got it. Back in 15." They signed off and Burke continued his patrol, weaving through the throng of pedestrians and dodging scooters that zipped along the narrow streets. A minute later, his satellite phone vibrated against his belt. He snatched it up, glancing at the screen before answering. Tiger. J. Carlton Moore's gruff voice came through, steady and commanding. Yes, sir. How's the operation? Nothing major to report. Perhaps what I have to tell you will give you a lead. I've received additional information on a man we've been watching for the past several months. His name is Costas Katsias. He is a wealthy and influential man there in Athens. The new information I've received suggests he may be more involved with Scorpion than we had thought. Check him out, Tiger. He may be important. Burke waited a beat, ensuring Moore had disconnected, then clipped the phone back to his belt. The lead was thin, but it was something. A name, a target. He keyed the radio. I got a call from Moore. He gave me the name of a suspected Scorpion contact here in Athens. Wants us to check him out. I thought maybe I'd ask Andre about him. Does this mean this pointless search is over? Lindsay's voice carried a mix of relief and exasperation. Yes, I'm headed toward Andre's hotel right now. They arrived at the Electra Palace and took the elevator to Andre's room. The door swung open to reveal Andre, sweat glistening on his chiseled features, a towel draped around his thick neck, and a jug of water clutched in one massive hand. His grin was warm, almost disarming, as he ushered them inside. Come in. I was finishing my workout. It will not take me long. Burke and Lyndsey settled onto a small plush couch, his fabric a stark contrast to the utilitarian exercise equipment dominating the room, a weight bench, a rack of dumbbells, and a heavy iron bar. Andre returned to his routine, his movements precise and powerful. How did you get that stuff in here? Burke asked, genuinely curious. I took it apart and carried it in piece by piece, Andre replied, his voice casual as he adjusted a weight plate. And the management didn't mind? Nobody asked me to stop. Burke's eyes flicked to Andre's Herculean physique, the muscles rippling beneath his fitted tank top, and understood why no one had dared complain. Andre grabbed the iron bar, stacking weights on both ends with a reckless abandon that made Burke wince. He clamped the plates in place, lay back on the bench, and began lifting, the bar bending slightly under the load. Burke waited for signs of strain, but Andre pumped the weights with the ease of a man lifting a broomstick. After one final rep, he rested the bar in his brackets and rolled off the bench, rising with a fluid grace that belied his size. I am going to order more weights, Andre said, almost apologetically, as if the hundreds of pounds he just lifted were inadequate. If one wishes to improve, one must challenge oneself. Yes, mustn't one, Burke said, his tone dry. How much were you lifting there? Andre waved a dismissive hand. It is of no importance. He took a deep swig from his water jug, wiping his mouth with a towel. Would you like to have a try with the weights? Burke shook his head, patting his blazer. No thanks, these are my good clothes, and I don't want to get them all sweaty. Lyndsey stifled a snort beside him, and Burke shot her a mock glare before turning back to Andre. Have you heard of a man named Costas Katsias? Andre paused mid-motion, a weight plate in hand, his dark eyes flickering with recognition. He set the plate down carefully and straightened, his expression neutral. I know of Katsias, yes. I understand he is an important man in Athens. He is very influential and very rich. He throws many parties, and all the important people in Athens and the surrounding area desire invitations to them. Andre resumed stacking weights, his movements deliberate, and glanced back to Burke. Why do you wish to know about Katsias? I was told he may have connections to Scorpion and thought it might be wise to check him out. Andre's expression grew serious. It would be very difficult for you or Miss Archer to see him. He lives in a well-guarded mansion with security systems and armed guards. He is not a man whose house you walk up to and knock on the door. He sees by appointment only. Burke's shoulders slumped slightly, the prospect of breaching such a fortress daunting. Even if they gained access, Cotius would likely reveal nothing. They needed to infiltrate his circle, mingle with his associates, or, better yet, sneak into his estate undetected. A tall order with cutting-edge security and armed guards in play. He cleared his throat. I don't suppose there's any way of getting an invitation to one of these parties, is there? Andre's grin returned, wide and conspiratorial. That might be arranged. Burke blinked, caught off guard. You act like it would be an easy thing. A man as security conscious as the one you described wouldn't let just anyone attend his parties. How do you propose to get an invitation? That is easy. I will ask him for one. I beg your pardon? Burke leaned forward, certain he'd misheard. Did you say ask him for one? Yes. Andre's eyes twinkled with amusement. And this Cotius will hand one over? An accommodating chap, is he? We Greeks hold family in high esteem, Andre explained, his voice warm with pride. You see, Costis Cotius is my uncle. 10. Burke's eyes lit up with a surge of enthusiasm at Andre's revelation that Costis Cotius, a suspected Scorpion contact, was his uncle. The daunting task of infiltrating Cotius's world, while still fraught with challenges, suddenly fell within reach. Andre, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel, leaned against his weight bench and explained that Cotius was hosting one of his lavish parties that very night. Convenient, Burke remarked, his tone laced with cautious optimism as he stood near the room's window, the vibrant hum of Athens filtering through the glass. Not really, Andre said, his deep voice carrying a hint of amusement. A rare week passes without one, sometimes more. A man in his position accumulates adversaries. Generosity is his way of staving off hostility. He has been threatened several times, but nothing has ever come of it. Everyone is too much in favor of the parties. If anyone ever harmed him, the villain would be most unpopular and disposed of. Burke chuckled, picturing a city held captive by the allure of free ouzo and opulent gatherings. It sounds like old Uncle K is pretty safe. And there are the guards, Andre added, his massive shoulders shrugging. They keep a close eye on him. Burke huffed, his mind flashing to countless missions derailed by vigilant security. I can't tell you the missions that could have been completed in an hour or less if there hadn't been guards running about. Pesky little things. Do you wish I get permission from Cotius to attend the upcoming gathering? Andre asked, his dark eyes steady, a faint grin tugging at his lips. I certainly do, Burke replied, his enthusiasm undimmed. He paused, curiosity piqued. How is it you and your uncle have gone such separate ways but still maintain a healthy relationship? Cotius does not know of my activities, Andre explained, his tone matter-of-fact. He believes I am in America, training to be a boxing champion. He is a big fan of boxing. Burke nodded, eyeing Andre's Herculean frame, the muscles rippling beneath his tank top like coiled steel. An understandable error. He straightened, signaling to Lyndsey, who stood nearby, her hair catching the light from a nearby lamp. Well, I'm sure you'll want to contact Cotius right away, so Lyndsey and I will leave you to it. They moved toward the door, but Burke paused, a practical thought striking him. Oh, and what sort of clothing do these festivities require? They are usually informal, Andre said. Once out in the hotel's plush corridor, the walls adorned with gilded mirrors and soft lighting, Burke turned to Lyndsey, a broad grin spreading across his face. What luck, eh? Lyndsey's expression remained skeptical, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted her blazer. That remains to be seen. We don't know this Cotius guy has anything to do with this case. We don't know he doesn't either, Burke countered, his voice low but firm as they descended in the elevator. the faint hum of the machinery blending with the distant sounds of the city. And this is the only lead we have at this point. I suggest we make the most of it. Maybe it'll even be fun. They returned to the Astor Hotel, the marble lobby cool and serene, and parted ways to prepare for the evening. Burke had barely stepped into his room, the scent of fresh linens mingling with the faint tang of the city air from the open balcony, when his satellite phone buzzed on the dresser. He snatched it up, the screen glowing in the dim light. "Hello? It is Andre," came the familiar rumble. "What's the good word?" Cotsius was overjoyed to hear from me and suggested himself I come to the party. He was a little more hesitant about two other people he did not know, however. Burke's stomach tightened, bracing for bad news. "Is this where the story turns ugly?" "No, no," Andre said, a chuckle in his voice. "I told him who you were, and after that he wouldn't hear of you staying behind." Burke's brow furrowed, a mix of relief and suspicion creeping in. "You, told him who I was? And who am I?" Andre sounded positively gleeful. "My boxing manager." Burke stifled a laugh, picturing himself in a garish tracksuit, barking orders from a ringside corner. "How did you sneak Lyndsey by the screening process?" "Uncle Cotsius is under the impression Miss Archer is my intended." Burke's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something, jealousy perhaps, stirring in his chest. "Your intended?" "I apologize, Mr. Burke, but it was the only way I could get her in." "Hey, don't apologize," Burke said, forcing a casual tone, though his grip on the phone tightened. "She means nothing to me." "Of course." Andre's voice carried a knowing edge, as if he saw through the bluff. "Where does this Cotsius character reside?" "Uncle Cotsius lives in Delphi. A car will be around to pick you up at 8. I suggest you be prepared to leave when it arrives. Uncle Cotsius's driver is very impatient." "Sure thing," Burke replied, his mind flashing to the breakneck cab ride in New York, a cabbie who could likely give Cotsius's driver a run for his money. He ended the call, already mapping out the evening ahead, a high-stakes gamble in the lion's den. 11. Burke stood in the marble-floored lobby of the Astor Hotel, the soft glow of chandeliers casting a warm ambiance over the bustling space. Dressed for Costas Cotsius's party, he'd opted for understated elegance to avoid standing out. Black slacks and a matching shirt, paired with a tailored gray sport coat that concealed the Heckler & Koch USP nestled in his shoulder holster. His hair was neatly combed, and he leaned casually against a pillar, checking his watch, 7:58 p.m. The anticipation of the evening's mission, infiltrating the inner circle of a suspected scorpion contact, thrummed in his veins, tempered by the ever-present need to blend in. Lyndsey descended the grand staircase, and Burke's breath caught. Her outfit was simple yet striking, a white silk blouse that shimmered faintly under the lights, tucked into sleek black slacks that hugged her frame. Her hair was loosely pulled back, secured at the nape of her neck with a delicate golden clasp, a few tendrils framing her face. The ensemble was understated, but its effect was anything but. Every man in the lobby seemed to pause, their gazes lingering as she moved with effortless grace. She halted at the bottom of the stairs, scanning the room until her eyes found Burke. He raised a hand and she walked toward him, her smile both familiar and disarming. Burke watched her approach, the familiar twinge in his stomach, feeling like he used to and preparing to escort her out for the evening. He hated what the incident with Stu had done to her. Convinced he would blame her for what had happened that night, she had withdrawn from him without explanation. It had taken him weeks to find out what had happened, after which he had tried to convince her that his feelings had not changed. She'd refused to listen and canceled their pending engagement. 2 years passed by without so much as a postcard. Then, suddenly, she had appeared in his garage. As the car arrived, Lindsay's voice snapped him back to the present, her tone casual as she stood before him, seemingly oblivious to the stir she had caused among the lobby's male onlookers. Not yet, Burke said, glancing at his watch again. If Andre's warning about the driver's impatience held true, their ride would arrive any moment. As if summoned, the lobby doors swung open and Andre stepped inside, cutting an imposing figure in tailored gray slacks and a dark blue pullover that strained slightly over his massive frame. His eyes sparkled with his usual warmth, but his presence commanded attention. "It looks as if your intended has arrived," Burke said, his voice dripping with mock bitterness, unable to resist a jab at Andre's cover story. "I wonder how many pounds of grease he had to slather on before he could get into those clothes." Lindsay's lips twitched, her eyes glinting with mischief. "I can imagine it would be hard for him to find clothes that fit," she said, her tone teasingly cruel. "With all those sexy, rippling muscles, I mean." Burke cast about for a sharp retort, but found himself at a loss, his usual wit failing him under her playful gaze. He settled for a scowl, which only widened her grin. "The car is ready," Andre announced, his deep voice cutting through their banter. "If you will follow me, please." He offered his arm to Lyndsey with a gentlemanly flourish. She took it, shooting Burke a conspiratorial wink as she whispered, "Appearances." Burke growled under his breath, a mix of amusement and irritation, and followed them toward the door. Andre held it open for Lyndsey, who stepped out into the balmy Athenian night. Burke was about to follow when his eyes caught the vehicle waiting at the curb, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz, its tinted windows and polished chrome exuding understated menace. But it wasn't the car that froze him in place. It was the driver. The man had his window rolled down, engaged in a low conversation with a passerby on the sidewalk. His face was partially shadowed, but the blond hair and sharp jawline bore an uncanny resemblance to the mysterious pursuer Burke had spotted at JFK Airport. His pulse quickened, suspicion flaring as he halted just inside the door. Andre noticed his hesitation and glanced back, his brow furrowing. "Something wrong, Mr. Burke?" "Andre, what name did you use when you mentioned me to your Uncle Cotsius?" Burke asked, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the driver. "John Remus, of course. Is that correct?" "Yeah, it's fine. I wondered because I think I may know the man driving the car, and wondered if this was a coincidence or a trap." "The man driving is Simon," Andre said, his tone calm but thoughtful. "He has been with Uncle Cotsius for 7 years." "Well, he looks a lot like the chap who followed me around in JFK Airport." "Ah, yes, Miss Archer mentioned that." Andre paused, his massive frame blocking the doorway as he considered the implications. "Likely a coincidence. I know of no way they could know your identity from the name I gave my uncle. If you wish, I will walk out first, and you can walk beside me and keep your head down. Simon rarely attends the parties, so if you can make it into the house without being recognized, you should be all right." Burke nodded, his jaw tight. Andre stepped out, holding the door for Lyndsey, who glided toward the Mercedes with effortless poise. Burke stayed close to Andre's side, using the big man's bulk to shield his face as they approached the car. Lyndsey slid into the rear seat, moving to the far side, followed by Andre. Burke climbed in last, relieved to find tinted glass separating the front and back compartments, ensuring the driver, Simon or otherwise, couldn't spot him in the rearview mirror. As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, its engine purring smoothly, Burke settled back, his hand resting near his holster, ready for whatever Cotsius's party might bring. 12. The black Mercedes-Benz glided to a stop before an imposing iron gate, its intricate scrollwork gleaming under the moonlight. Burke peered out the tinted window, his gaze settling on a guard stationed at one side, a menacing assault rifle gripped in one hand, while the other restrained two massive Dobermans, their eyes glinting with barely contained ferocity. Burke glanced at Lyndsey, seated beside him, her poised demeanor belying the concealed weapon she knew she carried, likely tucked into a discreet holster beneath her silk blouse. Andre, however, was a mystery. His snug blue pullover and tailored gray slacks left little room to hide anything, the fabric straining against his frame with every movement. The driver, Simon, pressed a button on his dashboard, and the heavy gate slid open with a low hum, the sound barely audible over the Doberman's low growls. The Mercedes eased through the opening, pausing briefly as the guard leaned in to verify the driver's identity, his flashlight casting stark shadows across the car's sleek exterior. Satisfied, he waved them through, and the vehicle began its ascent up a long, winding road that snaked through a darkened hillside, the only illumination coming from the car's headlights slicing through the night. The sudden appearance of Cottius's mansion took Burke's breath away. One moment, the road was flanked by shadowy trees and rocky outcrops. The next, a sprawling estate emerged, its countless windows aglow with warm light, casting a golden halo against the starlit sky. Simon pulled up to the mansion's grand entrance, a set of double doors framed by marble columns. Burke tensed, expecting the driver to open their door and potentially recognized him from JFK. Andre, sensing the hesitation, reached for the intercom. "We'll see to ourselves from here," he said firmly. Simon nodded, closing his own door with a soft thud. Burke waited for the click of the locks, then opened his door and stepped out, the cool evening air washing over him, crisp with a scent of pine and distant sea salt. He inhaled deeply, steadying his nerves. Andre joined him, his massive frame dwarfing Burke as he stood on the cobblestone drive. "Invigorating, is it not? Something I miss when in New York. I love it. But this—" He turned in a slow semicircle, his arms sweeping toward the rolling hills and star-dusted horizon. "This is my home." They approached the front door, Lyndsey walking beside Andre with the practiced ease of a fiancée, her arm lightly linked with his. An attendant in a crisp black suit awaited them, his expression neutral as Andre presented the invitation, a cream-colored card embossed with elegant script. The attendant nodded and swung the door open, revealing a grand entryway that exuded opulence. Immense chandeliers, suspended by gilded chains, cast a radiant glow across polished mahogany furniture and marble floors that gleamed like liquid moonlight. As they followed a second attendant down a long hallway, Burke stole glances into the rooms they passed, each a showcase of wealth, adorned with plush carpets in royal blue, deep purple, maroon, and gold, their vibrant hues complemented by intricate tapestries and gleaming antiques. Soft laughter and the delicate strains of a string quartet drifted through the air, mingling with the clink of glasses and murmured conversations. "I'd hate to pay the electric bill for this place," Burke muttered under his breath, his eyes tracing the ornate molding along the ceiling. Ahead, the hum of a larger crowd grew louder, signaling their approach to the main room. He was right. The vast ballroom was a sea of elegantly dressed guests, their voices a lively hum as they mingled beneath a vaulted ceiling painted with frescoes of Greek myths. In one corner, the quartet played, their bows gliding in perfect unison, while waiters in white jackets wove through the crowd, balancing trays of sparkling wine and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Their guide paused and beckoned to a tall, distinguished man standing among a cluster of prosperous-looking guests, their tailored suits and glittering jewelry marking them as Athens' elite. When the man turned, Burke knew instantly this was Costas Cotsius. The resemblance to Andre was striking, strong jaw, piercing dark eyes, though Cotsius's dark hair was meticulously styled, and his wire-rimmed spectacles lent him a scholarly air. Excusing himself from his companions, Cotsius approached with a regal stride, his impeccable suit moving with him like a second skin. Lyndsey leaned close to Burke, her breath warm against his ear. "I hope you know something about boxing. Since Cotsius is a fan, I'm sure he'll have lots of questions." Cotsius reached them, his face breaking into a warm smile as he clasped Andre's hand. Andre, it is good to see you again. How has America treated you? Very well, uncle, very well, Andre replied, his grin mirroring his uncle's. He gestured to his companions. I have the pleasure of introducing Miss Archer and Mr. Remus. Cassius enveloped Lyndsey in a brief, warm hug, kissing her cheek. A beautiful girl, Andre. You have chosen well. He turned to Burke, his gaze sharp but cordial. So, Mr. Remus, you are the one responsible for Andre's boxing career. Later in the evening, we must take time to discuss the matter. Boxing is a hobby with me. Burke nodded, forcing a smile as his mind scrambled for boxing trivia. I look forward to it. Excellent. Well, I must welcome the other guests. Make yourselves at home and enjoy yourselves. I'll be back to check on you. Cotius swept away, his posture as commanding as a monarch in his domain, his gray hair catching the light, his bearing exuding effortless authority. An impressive man, Burke remarked, once Cotius was out of earshot, his eyes tracking their host's movements through the crowd. Andre nodded, his expression tinged with caution. He is also a powerful man. With wealth and influence, he manipulates others with ease. Those he cannot persuade to do his will, he crushes. Lyndsey's gaze lingered on Cotius, her interest piqued. He seemed so gracious and hospitable. Outward appearances only, Andre warned, his voice low. He can be kind one moment and cruel the next. Burke believed it. Cotius's benevolence was a polished veneer, but his eyes held a steely, unreadable menace, a glint beneath the charm. Excusing himself, Burke drifted toward a drink table, where an attendant in a crisp white jacket offered a selection of Greece's finest wines. What can I serve you, sir? The man asked, his smile practiced. Burke sampled a glass of Assyrtiko, its crisp minerality a pleasant distraction, and nodded his approval before moving away. Across the room, Lyndsey and Andre played their roles convincingly, their laughter and linked arms projecting the image of a blissful couple. Burke caught Lyndsey's eye and signaled with a subtle nod that he was going to explore. Her expression flickered with a mix of envy and frustration. She clearly wanted to join him, but breaking away from Andre for long would risk blowing their cover. She turned back to a guest, offering congratulations, her smile radiant but strained, as Burke slipped into the crowd. 13. Burke slipped out of the bustling main ballroom, the lively hum of Costas Katsis's party fading as he stepped into the grand, marble-floored corridor they traversed earlier. He took a few cautious steps, pausing to glance over his shoulder, ensuring no one had followed. Satisfied, he turned and headed in the opposite direction from the earlier path, his dress shoes silent on the cool marble. Each turn in the labyrinthine hallway was committed to memory, a mental map forming to guide his retreat if needed. The corridor ended abruptly at a sharp corner, where a heavy wooden door stood, its surface adorned with a brass plaque reading "Authorized personnel only" in both Greek and English. Burke's pulse quickened, but he didn't hesitate. Grasping the ornate knob, he turned it slowly, half expecting resistance or a blaring alarm. The door yielded with a soft click, swinging open to reveal a dimly lit passage beyond. He stepped through, easing the door shut behind him, and braced for a siren that never came. The silence was almost unnerving, broken only by the faint echo of his own breathing. This new corridor was starkly different from the hallway he'd left behind. The lighting was sparse, flickering bulbs casting a pallid glow that deepened the gloom, transforming the space into something akin to a black and white photograph of a medieval fortress. Dark wooden panels lined the walls, interspersed with oil paintings in heavy gilt frames. Burke, no art connoisseur, recognized names like Caravaggio and Titian scrawled in elegant script, their value undeniable even to his untrained eye. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint, musty scent, as if this part of the mansion saw little use. Ahead, the corridor narrowed, and the silhouette of a spiral staircase loomed, its wrought iron railing curling upward into shadow. Burke ascended the stairs, each step deliberate, the creak of the wood muffled by his careful tread. At the top, he emerged onto a small, circular landing, less oppressive than the lower passage thanks to a sliver of light spilling from a partially open door to his right. The faint murmur of voices reached him. Two men, their tones sharp and heated. Burke's instincts flared. This was no casual chat. He crept forward, pressing himself flat against the cold stone wall beside the door, his gray sport coat blending into the shadows. Peering around the doorframe, he glimpsed a lavish room, its decor as ornate as the party spaces below: velvet drapes, a gleaming mahogany desk, and a crystal chandelier suspended from a coffered ceiling. But instead of revelers, it held only two men, standing close, their gestures animated as they argued in low, vehement tones. Burke's blood ran cold as he recognized them: the blond man who'd driven the Mercedes and his dark-haired companion from JFK Airport. The blonde was speaking, his voice carrying just enough for Burke to catch fragments, phrases like James Burke and disposal. They were plotting his elimination, using his real name, not his alias. The realization hit hard. They didn't know he was here, or he'd already be facing their guns. Burke eased his USP from its holster, the weapon's weight reassuring in his grip. He reached around the doorframe, fingers brushing the inner wall for a light switch, hoping to plunge the room into darkness and gain the upper hand. His hand found a raised switch cover, and he squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, bracing for the shift from light to dark. He flipped the switch. Instead of darkness, a blinding glare erupted above him. A chandelier on the landing blazed to life, bathing the area in harsh light. Burke cursed under his breath. He'd hit the wrong switch. Glancing into the room, he was relieved to see the men hadn't noticed, their argument uninterrupted. The door's narrow opening and the room's existing illumination had masked the change. Still gripping the switch, Burke leaned farther, searching for another control. His balance wavered, and as he shifted to steady himself, his foot struck the doorframe with a resounding thud, the sound echoing like a thunderclap in the quiet corridor. The men spun toward him, their eyes locking onto his exposed arm and shoulder. Hands dove inside jackets, emerged with pistols as they advanced. Burke lunged into the room, his free hand slapping down the wall until he found another switch. This time, the lights in both the room and the landing extinguished, plunging the space into near total darkness. Blinded, Burke darted to one side, moving at an angle to intercept their advance and prevent them from restoring the lights. His shoulder collided with a solid form, and he struck out blindly, his fist connecting with a satisfying crunch. A grunt followed, and the sound of a body hitting the floor spurred him forward. He leaped over the fallen man, sweeping his arms in wide arcs to locate the sound. His fingers grazed fabric, but a sharp blow to his wrist forced him back. Burke swung his foot in a low, wide arc, catching his opponent's leg. The man cursed in a language Burke couldn't place, scrambling away. Following the sound, Burke lunged, landing a solid punch that elicited a gasp. The man stumbled backward, and Burke seized his shirt front, delivering a precise uppercut to the chin. The figure collapsed, dead weight in his grasp, and Burke let him slide to the floor. As he turned to check on the first man, a heavy blow struck his shoulder, sending a jolt of pain down his arm. His eyes, now adjusting to the faint ambient light filtering through a distant window, made out a shadowy form. Burke ducked as another swing whistled past his ear, then retaliated with a right hook, his fist slamming into the side of the man's head. The blonde charged, his silhouette unmistakable. Burke met him with a knee to the face, feeling the crunch of a breaking nose. The man gasped, staggering back, his weapon clattering to the floor. Burke closed the distance, landing 2 quick jabs to the ribs before finishing with a devastating blow to the jaw. The blonde crumpled, silent and still, as Burke stood over him, chest heaving, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. 14. Burke caught his breath, his chest heaving from the brawl, and stumbled to the wall, fumbling for the light switch. He flipped it, blinking as the room's chandelier flickered back to life, casting a warm glow over the opulent space and the 2 unconscious men sprawled on the floor. His eyes darted around, searching for something to secure them. Time was short. They could wake at any moment, and he needed them restrained. Along one wall hung heavy red velvet tapestries, flanked by thick ornamental cords. He crossed to them, pulling out his pocket knife, its blade glinting as he sliced off a generous length of cord and tested its strength with a sharp tug. Gaudy, but one can't be choosy in these situations, he muttered. Burke bound the men's wrists and ankles, the cord biting into their skin as he knotted it tightly. He retrieved his Heckler & Koch USP from where it had skidded during the fight, holstering it with a practiced motion. Crossing to the room's far door, he grasped the knob, only to find it locked. A quick scan confirmed it was the only other exit. Kneeling, he inspected the lock, a simple deadbolt, not overly complex. He could force it, but hesitated. Locked doors in places like this often triggered silent alarms, and crashing Katius's party with security wasn't on his agenda. Leaving the door for now, he moved to the draperies, pulling them aside to reveal tall windows and a glass door leading to an ornate balcony. He unlatched it and stepped outside, the cool night air a relief after the room's stuffiness. Below, the faint chatter of party-goers drifted up. Some had spilled onto the mansion's grounds to enjoy the evening. Looking down, Burke realized this side of the mansion abutted a sheer cliff, its depths swallowed by darkness. The distant sound of running water, a stream or river, echoed faintly. Curious, he fished a coin from his pocket and dropped it over the edge, counting silently until a faint splash reached his ears. Estimating the drop at roughly 200 feet, he leaned out, scanning the mansion's facade. Several windows and a few balconies dotted the wall farther down, their wrought iron railings barely visible in the moonlight. His eyes traced the cliff's rocky surface. It wasn't a climber's dream, but the visible handholds and footholds suggested a descent was possible. He considered scaling it, his fingers itching for the challenge, but a glance at his attire, black slacks, shirt, and gray sport coat, stopped him. The climb would shred his clothes, and returning to the party looking like he'd wrestled a bear would raise too many questions. A check of his watch confirmed he'd been gone too long. It was time to regroup. Burke descended the spiral staircase and re-entered the gloomy corridor, its medieval air unchanged. He just reached the main hallway, the marble gleaming, when a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. His heart lurched and he spun, fist raised, only to sag with relief at the sight of Andre's towering figure, his grin apologetic. "I did not mean to startle you," Andre said, his deep voice warm. "Simply practicing my ballet," Burke quipped, lowering his hands. Andre's brow furrowed, puzzled. "Never mind," Burke waved off the weak joke. "Did you want something?" "Miss Archer has been looking for you." "Is something wrong?" "I do not think so. I think she was a little upset you left her behind." Andre's grin returned, his eyes twinkling. "Miss Archer impresses me as the kind of woman who does not like to be left out of the action." "Your impression is accurate, Andre. Where is our heroine?" Andre pointed toward a side room off the main corridor. "She tired of the crowd and told Uncle Cotsius she had a sick stomach." "A ruse?" "I will only say that upon leaving the room, she experienced an impressive recovery." Burke chuckled, heading toward the indicated room, its door slightly ajar. How long are we required to remain in attendance at this shindig? Let me know when you are through, and I will make some excuse to Uncle Cotsius. It should not be a problem. Inside, Lyndsey sat in a plush fireside chair, her hair catching the glow of the hearth, her expression one of bored impatience. She straightened as Burke entered, her eyes narrowing. Did you find anything? Nothing at all, Burke lied, settling into a chair beside her. Her gaze dropped to his hands, where raw, bloodied knuckles betrayed his story. Your knuckles are cut and bleeding. What happened? Did you fall down the stairs? Burke glanced at his hands, the skin torn and oozing. Oh, that. I had a minor scuffle with a couple of brutes. It wasn't anything. Any brutes we know? The two men we saw earlier today, and the same two who followed me around in the airport. Lyndsey leaned forward, her voice low. Did they recognize you? I'm not sure, Burke said, recalling the darkened room. The room was dark. So they're working for Cotsius. This ties him to our mission. Burke nodded, his mind racing. Moore said they knew Cotsius was involved with Scorpion. If those men are after the briefcase and belong to Scorpion, logic would suggest Scorpion is not in possession of the briefcase after all. Then who has it? The question of the hour. I still like our theory there are more factions than just Onyx Sector and Scorpion involved here. In fact, I am of the opinion Scorpion, probably one or both men I fought with, was responsible for bugging my house. After all, Scorpion is known only information they would have gotten from my conversation with Carrie and no more. Lyndsey's eyes lit with realization. And this development would show Scorpion isn't the group who seems to have infiltrated Onyx Sector. How so? Remember the man on the plane? Distinctly. And the sniper who shot at you when you first arrived? How could I forget? They were the main reasons we decided there were more than one group working on this, because of the lack of coordination in the efforts. The one knew what flight you were on, and the sniper knew what hotel you would stay at, but the two men at JFK knew none of that. Burke followed her logic. Are you saying, since the two men, now known by us to be Scorpion agents, were in the dark concerning the details of the case, it must be some other organization that has placed a mole in Onyx Sector? Lyndsey nodded, her expression resolute. Do you have a problem with that reasoning? Not at all. I'm rather proud of you. I'm glad I finally impressed you. You always impress me. Burke flashed a grin, aiming for charm and catching a fleeting sparkle in her eye. That's not what I meant. Lyndsey's tone was mock indignation, but her lips twitched, betraying amusement. Burke checked his watch, the time urging action. Andre said he could get us out any time we wanted to leave, and I think it might be a good idea to disappear in case I was recognized. Let's blow this joint. I'll find Andre, and then we can. Burke turned to leave, but froze as a revolver's cold barrel pressed against his temple. His pulse spiked, his hand inching toward his USP, only to halt as he registered the man behind the gun. Costas Cotsius, his regal demeanor now a mask of icy menace, his gray hair glinting under the firelight, his wire-rimmed spectacles reflecting the flickering flames. 15. Cotsius's face was no longer that of the gracious host who had welcomed Burke and his companions earlier in the evening. His features were etched with stern lines, his eyes smoldering with barely contained fury as he pressed the revolver against Burke's temple. I would not be in too much of a hurry, Mr. Burke, Cotsius said, his voice low and menacing. The name's Remus, Mr. Cotsius. John Remus, Burke replied, clinging to his cover despite the gun's cold pressure. You can stop the charade. I know who you are. James Burke, Onyx Sector agent. Is that correct? You seem to have all the answers. I assume you found the two misfits I left upstairs? I did. And you should be glad I have great control over my personnel. They are most displeased with you. Well, I don't believe there's any need for further violence, Burke said, his tone calm but firm. I was defending myself. Your men attacked me. You should not have been roaming about the house unguided. You must admit that looked suspicious. My men were doing their job. Why did you send your men to follow me at John F. Kennedy Airport? I found that annoying. Cotius's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through his anger. Did you? Our intention was not to irritate you, Mr. Burke, I can assure you. Oh, killing me was more the idea, eh? Let us not play word games. A subtle movement in Burke's peripheral vision drew his attention. He glanced sideways, just long enough to see Andre's massive form creeping up behind Cotius, his movements silent despite his size. One thing I would like to know before I kill you, Cotius continued, the word kill slipping out as casually as an offer of wine. Is my nephew Andre involved in this? Or have you duped him into thinking you are who you say you are? Perhaps you should ask him. He's standing right behind you. Cotius smiled, his tone indulgent. You have read too many mystery novels, Mr. Burke. I would be embarrassed to fall for such a tired trick. Suit yourself. Burke folded his hands behind his back, his posture relaxed as he watched Andre position himself. And what about you, young lady? Cotius shifted his gaze to Lyndsey, seated nearby, her blonde hair catching the firelight. Are you a fake as well? Lyndsey's smile was defiant, the very fakest. Cotius's finger tightened on the trigger, his expression hardening. I suppose that concludes my business. After I dispose of you, I will find Andre and have a talk with him, since it is obvious you two will not inform on him. I will be most disappointed to learn my nephew is involved with such scoundrels. So long, friends. I assure you it will be quick and painless. Yes, Burke said, his eyes locked on Andre, who raised a massive fist behind Cotius. And so will this. Andre's arm descended, his fist striking the back of Cotius' neck with a dull thud. The older man collapsed without a sound, crumpling to the floor like a discarded coat, the revolver clattering beside him. Burke grinned, relief flooding through him. Just like the U.S. Marines. Nice timing. I was wondering if you'd make it. Cotius was becoming a little antsy. He always does before he kills someone, Andre said. The weight of his words hit Burke. You're familiar with his methods? As a child, I witnessed several executions. It is one thing that turned me against my uncle. Lyndsey stood, her voice cutting through the tension. I'd love to continue talking about this, but I'm getting the distinct feeling it's not safe around here. They hurried out of the room, moving swiftly through the mansion's marble corridors to the front door. The attendant, oblivious to the drama, smiled and wished them a good night. They returned the courtesy, maintaining their composure as Andre led them to the garage. The guard there recognized Cotius' nephew and accepted their claim that Cotius had permitted them to drive themselves home, handing over the keys to a sleek sedan. Talk about blowing our cover, Burke muttered as they sped down the winding road back to Athens, the city's lights twinkling in the distance. I suggest we check in at a different hotel tonight to buy us a little time. I don't think it'll take long for Cotius to send his henchmen after us. Uncle Cotius is a vengeful man, Andre agreed, his hands steady on the wheel. It will be more of a grudge match to him now. I do not think you should even go back to the hotel. What about our stuff? Lyndsey asked, her brow furrowing. We can't leave all of our equipment. Burke nodded, his mind racing through logistics. If we split up, we could move quickly. Lyndsey, you get us a room under an assumed name. Meanwhile, Andre and I will go to the Astor and grab the equipment. After dropping Lyndsey at a nondescript hotel in the Plaka district, Burke and Andre drove to the Astor, where they swiftly gathered their gear and luggage, stuffing it into the battered VW Polo. Burke urged Andre to join them at the new hotel, but the big Greek shook his head, his expression resolute. I do not believe they know where I am staying, but I will keep the doors locked all the same. Sleep with one eye open, Burke advised, clapping Andre on the shoulder. After Andre departed, Burke returned to their rooms at the Astor to ensure nothing was overlooked before checking out. He scanned the space, his eyes lingering on the balcony's view of the Acropolis, now shrouded in darkness. As he turned to leave, the room's telephone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the silence. He hesitated, counting 5 rings, his hand hovering over the receiver. Curiosity won out, and he picked it up. Hello? A voice, unfamiliar and thick with an accent, Eastern European perhaps, answered. Mr. Burke? Mr. James Burke? Who wants to know? The voice ignored the question. I have a deal for you, Mr. Burke. Are you interested? Should I be? I think so. It could prove beneficial to both of us. Burke sat on the edge of the bed, facing the door, and palmed his USP. This could be a ploy to delay him, giving Katya's men time to close in. But it might also be the lead they desperately needed, and he couldn't risk dismissing it. Let's hear it. We have the briefcase. Briefcase? Please do not play ignorant, Mr. Burke. We know all about you and why you are in Athens. We know you want the briefcase. We have it and are prepared to hand it over to you. How generous. What's the catch? The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. You Americans get right to the point, don't you? The catch, as you so indelicately phrased it, is this. We give you the briefcase, and in return you kill J. Carlton Moore. Burke's grip tightened on the phone. I beg your pardon? Kill who? Your boss, J. Carlton Moore. Think before you answer, Mr. Burke. This briefcase contains information vital to world security. What is the life of one man compared with that? Suppose I agree to these terms. What assurance would you have I'd follow through? We will wait for news of Mr. Moore's demise. If we do not hear of it within 2 weeks of our agreement, our agents have instructions to kill you instead. And if I refuse to play ball anyway, you will be killed along with your 2 partners, Andre Cotius and Miss Archer. Burke's jaw clenched, the threat against Lyndsey and Andre hitting hard. Sounds like a deal I can't refuse. A wise decision. We will meet at the Parthenon at 11:30, and I wouldn't be late. There are other groups in this city desirous to have the briefcase. It is in high demand. The line went dead, leaving Burke staring at the receiver, his mind racing. The Parthenon, a public yet exposed location, was a bold choice for a handover and a potential trap. He holstered his USP, grabbed the last of their gear, and headed out. 16. Burke staggered up the narrow staircase of the new hotel, a nondescript establishment tucked away in Athens's Plaka district, his arms laden with a pile of luggage and gear. The weight pressed against his chest, his breath coming in short gasps as he rounded the corner to the room number Lyndsey had texted him. She stood in the doorway, her hair catching the dim light of the hallway, her expression a mix of relief and amusement as she watched him struggle. You made it, she said, stepping aside. A brilliant observation, Burke panted, dragging himself into the room and dumping the bags in a heap on the worn carpet. Step aside, this stuff weighs a ton. Couldn't get a room on the first floor, could you? The view was better from up here, Lyndsey replied, her eyes glinting with mischief. Is Andre coming? Burke shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. He decided to stay where he was for the night. I tried to convince him to come over here, but he wouldn't do it. His satellite phone buzzed, cutting him off. He fished it from his pocket, glancing at the screen before answering. Tiger? J. Carlton Moore's gruff voice crackled through. Yes, sir. How are things progressing? No sign of the briefcase. I have an idea that situation may be remedied before long. Sir? We received confirmation the briefcase has left the United States, and we think it's headed your way. Looks as if I was right in my assessment. It slipped through our fingers here. We need you to apprehend it when it gets to Athens, which will be tomorrow morning. We'll do our best, Chief. And one more thing, Tiger. You haven't been prompt with your reports, and neither has Venus. I suggest you work on that. The call ended abruptly, as Moore's always did. Burke tossed the phone onto the bed. Lyndsey raised an eyebrow. Well? Moore thinks the briefcase is on its way right now. So it wasn't here before? Apparently not. Burke crossed to the room's window, pushing aside the heavy curtains to reveal a stunning view of the Acropolis, its ancient columns bathed in moonlight. He turned back to Lyndsey, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Forget what I said about the floor you picked. I think this one will work fine. What do you mean? Burke recounted the mysterious call he'd received at the Astor, detailing the offer to trade the briefcase for Moore's life and the rendezvous set for 11:30 at the Parthenon. You agree to this? Lyndsey's eyes widened, her voice sharp with disbelief. I assume you have some alternative plan? Sort of. Sort of? Well, I have the main part of it worked out. And that is? Hand me that black box over there, would you? Lyndsey retrieved the box from the pile of gear, and Burke opened it, revealing a disassembled sniper rifle, its components nestled in foam cutouts. He began assembling it with practiced efficiency, his fingers moving with the precision of long experience. Lyndsey watched, her brow furrowing. A sniper rifle? Hand me that small leather case. Burke, what do you have in mind? I'm going decoy hunting. Don't tell me you're going to shoot your contact. Lyndsey, I'm going to shoot my contact. She crossed her arms, skeptical. But the Parthenon is quite a distance from here. I didn't know you were an expert marksman. I can hold my own, especially when I have this. Burke reached into the leather case and pulled out a night vision scope and a silencer, their matte finishes absorbing the room's dim light. Very convenient things to have around. I must remember to commend Moore on his preparedness when we return. If we return. Let's not give ourselves over to pessimism. Who said, it ain't over till it's over? Winston Churchill? Yogi Berra. Same thing. What time is it? Lyndsey checked her watch. 10 minutes until 11. What are you going to do if that scope isn't zeroed in? Miss, obviously. Burke moved to the window, sliding it open to let in the cool night air. He extended the rifle barrel outside, peering through the scope and making minute adjustments. I can see the inscriptions. How about turning off the lights and locking the door? I don't want to be seen from the street, and I don't want someone walking in on me while I'm sighting down a sniper rifle at one of the world's most famous structures. That would be very hard to explain. Very. Lyndsey flicked off the lights and secured the door, the room plunging into near darkness, save for the moonlight filtering through the window. Are you expecting an ambush? Is that why you aren't going to the Parthenon? Or are you afraid of the dark? Both. My unknown caller made some interesting statements. First, he said the briefcase was here in Athens. I know from Moore it just left the United States. Moore could be wrong, Lyndsey pointed out. He could be, but I doubt it. He hasn't been yet. Besides, there's another thing that causes me to doubt the word of the informer. If they want Moore killed so badly, why not do it themselves? Considering the knowledge they seem to have of the organization, it wouldn't be too difficult. It isn't as if he moves around a lot like I do. You think they set this up to kill you? As much as it pains me to admit anyone might be sufficiently immune to my charms to wish me harm, yes. Burke rested the rifle on the windowsill, steadying it. What time is it now? You have a watch. Check the time yourself. I was trying to make you a part of the action. He peered through the scope, scanning the Acropolis's ancient stones. Ah, looks as if they've arrived early. And what do you know? The guy isn't alone. He has three henchmen who are at this moment concealing themselves behind some pillars. Do you recognize any of them? I've never seen the henchman. The guy with the briefcase is the chap from the airplane and the suspected sniper. Burke settled into position, his breathing slow and controlled. The man with the briefcase stood still for a moment, then moved to a slab of rock and sat, clearly waiting. Confident his target wouldn't bolt, Burke aligned the crosshairs, clicked off the safety, and took up the trigger slack. He squinted one eye, exhaling softly as he squeezed the trigger. A muffled pop broke the silence, and through the scope, he saw the man dive aside as a rock outcropping near his head shattered, fragments spraying as the bullet struck. The man scrambled to his feet, shouting and waving to his henchmen. All four bolted, vanishing behind the hillside's shadows. Burke leaned back, closing the window with a soft thud. He began disassembling the rifle, his movements methodical. "Oh, well," he said, a wry edge to his voice. "At least I know my instincts were right." "How's that?" "They all ran off, but they left the briefcase behind in the confusion. They wouldn't have done that if it had been the genuine article." He packed the rifle away, then grabbed his bag from the pile on the floor. "I'm going to bed. Tomorrow told me it's going to be a long day. What's my room number?" Lyndsey shifted, her expression uneasy. Burke's eyes narrowed, his patience fraying. "What, did you forget?" They only had one open room. Burke sighed, dropping his bags with a thud. "And I suppose you get the bed?" Lyndsey shrugged, a faint smile playing on her lips. "It's pretty large. It would probably fit two." 17. Burke stood outside Andre's room at the Electra Palace, the morning sun filtering through the corridor's high windows, casting long shadows across the plush carpet. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing faintly in the quiet hallway. No response. No welcoming call, no heavy footsteps, no clatter of the door chain or click of the deadbolt. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time, his knuckles rapping sharply against the wood. Still nothing. A prickle of unease crept up his spine as he grasped the handle, finding it unlocked. The door swung open with a soft creak, and he peered into the dimly lit room, Lyndsey close behind, her breath catching as she followed him inside. Andre lay sprawled across the bed, his massive frame unnaturally still. The sheets were soaked crimson, the blood pooling beneath him, stark against the white linen. The coppery scent hung heavy in the air. Burke closed his eyes for a moment, the sight searing into his memory, then stepped back, his jaw tight. "There's nothing we can do for him now," he said, his voice low and steady despite the weight in his chest. "And there's no way we could ever cover that up. We'll leave this one for the local authorities to grapple with." Lyndsey's face was pale, her eyes fixed on the scene. "Cotsius?" "That would be my guess. He didn't seem too pleased to think his beloved nephew was involved with us hoodlums." "It's horrible to think about doing this to your own nephew." "Cotsius is a shrewd, cold operator. Not one I relish crossing." The drive back to their new hotel in the Plaka was quiet, the VW Polo's engine humming as Athens' bustling streets rolled past. Burke and Lyndsey sat in silence, each grappling with Andre's loss and the mission's escalating stakes. In Lyndsey's room, the Acropolis visible through the window, they sat on opposite sides of a small table, the weight of their thoughts filling the space between them. Finally, Lyndsey broke the silence, her voice resolute. "What are we going to do about the briefcase? It's supposed to be arriving tonight." "I thought about staking out the airport," Burke said, leaning back in his chair, "but we have no idea which plane it's coming in on or even which airport. I'm assuming that once it enters the country, it'll go straight to good old Uncle K." He pulled his satellite phone from his belt, its sleek surface cool against his palm. "I suppose I should call Moore and let him know what's happened. He won't be pleased." The call with Moore unfolded as Burke had anticipated. Moore's voice was a storm of rage and grief, his protective streak for his agents legendary within Onyx Sector. The loss of Andre, a man of such physical and mental fortitude, hit him hard, his tirade punctuated by colorful profanity that Burke could almost see scrawled in the air. "Bring the killers to justice," Moore growled, his final order before the line went dead, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. "Told you," Burke said, setting the phone down with a wry shake of his head. "The old man is out for blood." Lyndsey leaned forward, her blonde hair catching the light. "What all did he have to say? You talked for several minutes." "Well, minus the creative profanity, the conversation pretty much consisted of hello, what, and kill. But he also confirmed my suspicion that Scorpion has the briefcase. And while that doesn't solve a lot, it makes me feel a little better about my plan." "And what plan is this?" Lindsay's eyes narrowed, a mix of curiosity and caution. "A daring plan I may have to get Blitz to carry out." "Oh, you've done stupid things before. Not like this. It's worse than dangerous. And the bad part is I'll need your help." Lindsay's face lit up, a spark of excitement breaking through her usual composure. For someone just informed they'd be part of a life-threatening scheme, she seemed almost delighted. "When are you planning on carrying out this plan?" "We'll need the cover of darkness, so we'll do it tonight." "And in the meantime?" Burke's lips quirked in a grim smile. "Make sure your insurance premiums are paid up." 18. In the shadow of Delphoy's ancient cliffs, where olive trees whispered in the valleys below, Burke stood at the base of a towering rock face, gazing up at the distant lights of Kostas Katis' mansion perched above. The Greeks once called this place the center of the world, and now, under the weight of the mission, Burke felt its gravity. This could be his final operation, the specter of death sharpening his senses. The night air was sweet, laced with the scent of pine and earth, and the chorus of crickets and rustling leaves seemed profoundly vivid, each sound a reminder of life's fragility. Lindsay stood beside him, her hair tucked beneath a black cap as she studied the cliff. The late hour cloaked them in darkness, their black attire blending seamlessly with the surroundings, rendering them nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. "Okay," Burke whispered, his voice barely carrying over the night's hum. "I'll scale the cliff and secure the rope so you can climb up after me. Meanwhile, keep a sharp eye out for guards. They're probably roaming the grounds above, but since we don't know their schedules, we'll have to take extra precautions." Lindsay raised her pistol, its silencer glinting faintly in the moonlight. "You mean like this?" "Exactly like that." Burke opened his backpack, confirming the coiled rope was secure, and checked his own silenced USP, its weight reassuring in his holster. He reached up, testing a jagged handhold on the cliff face. It held firm, and he began his ascent, his fingers groping for outcroppings in the dark, each movement deliberate and tense. Halfway up, a section of rock, weakened by time or weather, crumbled under his grip. Burke dangled by his left hand, his heart pounding as sweat trickled down his back, his palms growing slick. His mind raced, adrenaline sharpening his focus. With his free hand, he reached blindly, searching for anything, a crack, a ledge, an outcrop. His fingers brushed a small protrusion, but it slipped away, the rock scraping his nails as he clawed desperately. His left hand began to slip, the strain burning through his muscles. Just as his grip faltered, his right hand found a narrow crevice. He jammed his fingers in, the rough stone biting into his skin, and steadied himself. Inch by agonizing inch, he continued, his boots scraping for footholds, his body pressed against the cliff's unyielding surface. Lindsay's whispered encouragement floated up from below, a lifeline in the darkness. The climb was tortuously slow, each movement a battle against exhaustion and gravity. At last, his hand grazed the mansion's foundation, a rough-hewn edge that marked the end of the cliff. A new fear gripped him. What if the mansion's wall was smooth, unclimbable? The climb would have been for nothing, forcing a perilous descent in the dark. Flattening himself against the rock, he reached up, running his hand over the building surface. Relief washed over him. The wall was constructed of large, uneven stones, their texture offering ample holds. With renewed vigor, he tackled the final stretch, his muscles screaming but his resolve unbroken. His fingers found the ledge of a balcony, and with a final surge of strength, he gripped the sill, hauling himself over the railing and collapsing onto the cool stone floor, his chest heaving. Burke lay there, catching his breath, his body aching as he willed his tensed muscles to relax. He reached into his backpack, unwinding the rope and securing it to the balcony's sturdy railing, then dropped the free end down the cliff. The rope tautened as Lyndsey began her ascent, the railing creaking under the strain. Burke watched it anxiously, but it held firm. Soon, Lyndsey's hands appeared and she clambered onto the balcony, her breathing heavy but controlled. She looked at Burke, admiration in her eyes. "That was quite a climb you made. There were a couple of moments I thought the mission was over before it began." "You're not the only one. For a minute there, I was regretting not having left detailed instructions for my funeral." Lyndsey began coiling the rope. "I assume we don't want this thing hanging around?" "Puns in the face of danger, I'm impressed. But you're right, the last thing we need is a guard to wander by and notice a dangling rope. I think that's known in the trade as a dead giveaway." Burke stepped across the narrow balcony to the glass door, peering into the darkened room beyond. He tested the handle, locked as expected. Fishing a pinlight from his pocket, he shone its narrow beam on the lock, revealing a simple mechanism. With his jackknife, he wedged the blade between the door and the jamb, twisting it upward and to the left. A faint click sounded, and the door swung open on silent, well-oiled hinges. "Well, that was easy," Burke said, his voice a low murmur. "Then again, one would expect this side of the house to be safe from normal intruders." "Good thing you're not normal," Lyndsey muttered, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Oh, quiet." 19. The two agents stepped through the heavy curtain, emerging into a grand room that mirrored the opulent chamber Burke had infiltrated earlier. The space was adorned with gilded moldings and a massive chandelier, its crystals dim in the absence of light. They crossed the polished hardwood floor, their black attire blending with the shadows, and reached the door. Burke tested the handle. It turned smoothly, and they slipped into a long hallway lined with paintings of various sizes, their frames glinting faintly under the soft glow of recessed lights. "It appears Cotzius is quite a lover of art," Burke whispered, his eyes scanning the canvases, landscapes, portraits, and mythological scenes. "Strange how it seems the cruelest of men always have a passion for beauty." As they rounded a corner, Burke halted so suddenly that Lyndsey nearly collided with him. He pressed a finger to his lips, pointing down the hallway. A dark figure lounged against a doorway, his silhouette barely discernible. Beside him, propped against the wall, was an assault rifle, its barrel catching the faint light. The man's head bobbed, his chin dipping to his chest before jerking up, fighting sleep. Burke drew his silenced USP, steadied his aim, and fired a single shot. The man crumpled soundlessly, a stain spreading across his forehead. Burke approached, snatching the assault rifle and slinging it over his shoulder. He knelt, rifling through the man's pockets, and found two spare magazines, which he tucked into his backpack. His fingers brushed a folded piece of paper in a vest pocket. Unfolding it under the beam of his pinlight, he motioned to Lyndsey. She leaned in, squinting at the paper. "It's a floor plan." Burke nodded, his voice low. "It even marks old Uncle Kay's bedroom. Look at this. It shows the main security control room. That sounds promising, especially since it also shows the place is protected by alarm systems. If I'm reading this map correctly, we about walked into one. There's one on this hallway? No, but it looks like this one ends at another hallway that runs lengthwise. The left passage leads to the security control room, and the right is protected by an alarm. Does it say where the right passageway leads? No, I hope that means it's important. I think our first move is to find our way into the control room and disable those alarms. I don't fancy wandering around here with those things active, even with a map. Besides, I doubt we'd get anywhere we need to go without tripping one. They continued down the hall, their steps silent on the plush runner. Voices, laughter, and casual chatter drifted from ahead, growing louder. Slowing their pace, they reached the intersection indicated on the floor plan. Burke peered around the corner, then pulled back, his expression grim. There are 3 or 4 rather intimidating gentlemen lounging around down there, all armed like the guy I took out. Lindsay's eyes narrowed. I take it rushing them wouldn't be a great idea. No, but we might pick them off from here. There are 3 of them, 2 of us. We both have silenced weapons. I'll take the guy on the left, you target the one on the right. And the third? After the first, we both go for the last man. We need fast kills, no shots or screams. They positioned themselves, weapons raised. Burke counted down, his voice a whisper. 3, 2, 1. Their silenced pistols coughed in unison, and the first 2 guards dropped, lifeless before they hit the floor. As Burke and Lyndsey swung their barrels toward the third, a control room door swung open. A 4th guard stepped out, his eyes widening at the crumpled bodies. He dropped to one knee, unslinging his rifle. Burke and Lyndsey fired again, their shots nearly simultaneous. Burke's bullet grazed past the kneeling guard, thudding into the far wall. Lyndsey's caught the third man in the chest, and he collapsed, clutching the wound, still alive. The hallway erupted in a staccato blaze as the kneeling guard unleashed a burst from his automatic, bullets tearing through the air. Burke and Lyndsey threw themselves back around the corner, plaster dust raining down as the wall absorbed the gunfire. Burke unslung the stolen assault rifle, checking its magazine. As soon as that ass stops firing, I'm going around the corner with guns blazing. When I go, I'm not stopping, so stay close. Lyndsey nodded, her jaw set, eyes cold with determination. Burke felt a surge of admiration. One hell of a woman, he thought. The gunfire ceased, the silence deafening. Burke shouldered the rifle and charged around the corner, the weapon bucking in his grip as he advanced. The kneeling guard toppled sideways, his chest riddled with rounds. The wounded third guard caught a burst, silencing his groans. A 5th guard appeared at the corridor's end, raising his weapon, but Lyndsey's shot dropped him before he could fire. Burke's rifle clicked empty. He dug into his backpack, swapped in a fresh magazine, and sprinted to the control room door, flattening himself against the wall beside it. Lyndsey darted past the open door, bullets chewing the opposite wall, and took position on the far side. Burke grabbed a fallen guard's rifle, replaced its empty magazine with one from the man's belt, and tossed it to Lyndsey. Another burst of gunfire answered, and Burke grinned. They were rattled in there, unsure if they faced a pair of agents or a full assault team. He caught Lyndsey's eye and signaled to slice the pie, a SWAT tactic for clearing a room by pivoting in an arc to minimize exposure. Burke held up 3 fingers, folding them down one by one. On the final count, they moved, slicing into the room from opposite sides, weapons blazing. Computer screens shattered, sparks flying as bullets tore through monitors and switchboards, their lights blinking frantically. The gunfire stopped, and Burke surveyed the carnage. Most guards were down, some dead, others cowering with hands clasped behind their heads. One man stood, arms raised, his face pale with terror. Burke rushed him, slamming him against the wall, the impact rattling a nearby console. The briefcase. Where is it? 20. The guard writhed in Burke's iron grip, his face pale against the flickering wreckage of the control room, where shattered screens and sparking switchboards bore witness to the firefight. I know nothing about a briefcase, he gasped. Burke's fist connected with the man's jaw, a sharp crack echoing in the confined space. Come on, I don't have time to play games. Tell me, or you'll join the others. He gestured at the fallen guards, blood pooling beneath them. The man's eyes widened, but he remained silent. Burke shook him, his patience fraying. Did you not receive a delivery earlier today? The guard nodded, realization dawning. Yes, he stammered. Yes, we did. I didn't know what it was. Where is the delivery? Burke growled, his teeth clenched. Who was it delivered to? Mr. Kotzius. I think he put it in his safe. Burke swung the rifle butt, striking the man's temple. The guard crumpled, unconscious. A grunt behind him spun Burke around, just as Lyndsey dispatched another guard with a swift blow, her silenced pistol still in hand. They bolted from the room. Burke pausing to consult the crumpled floor plan from his pocket, he pointed right, folding the paper away. This looks like the shortest way there. Shouts and pounding footsteps echoed behind them. Reaching a corner, they dove around it as more guards swarmed the control room, their flashlight beams slicing through the gloom. I don't think they saw us, Lyndsey whispered. Let's not wait around to find out. They'll split up and search soon. Burke nodded, his pulse racing. They know this place better than we do, and it won't take long to box us in. Kotzi's room should be just ahead. As if summoned, a door on the hallway's end swung open, revealing Costas Kotzius in a red robe and slippers, his gray hair disheveled. His eyes widened at the sight of Burke and Lyndsey, and he lunged back, trying to slam the door. Burke threw his shoulder against it, the wood shuddering as Kotzius stumbled, clutching a chair for balance. Burke and Lyndsey burst in, Burke locking the door behind them with a click. He turned to Kotzius, a sardonic smile on his lips. Well, we meet again. Mr. Burke, Kotzius spat, his voice venomous. I should have killed you last night. Don't blame yourself, Burke said. If you hadn't taught your nephew so well, perhaps you would have. Andre, he was a traitor. I cannot abide disloyalty. Was? So you know about him? Kotzius's tone was ice. I am not ashamed to say I had him killed for his treason. Very medieval of you. Now, I hate to be impolite, but Miss Archer and I are pressed for time. Where's the briefcase? I won't deny I have it, Kotzius said, his eyes gleaming with defiance. Since you've risked everything coming here, I suspect you know it is true. But you cannot force me to tell you where it is. Do you have a safe in this room? Kotzius' silence was answer enough, his expression a mask. Burke sighed. I can see you're going to be difficult. Lyndsey, keep an eye on Mr. Kotzius. If he moves, shoot him in the knee. He began searching the room, lifting paintings and checking behind furniture, his movements methodical. Kotzius' voice halted him. This exercise is pointless. If you promise to leave my home and let me live, I'll tell you where the safe is. Now that's using good, solid judgment, Burke said, clapping mockingly. It's behind the landscape painting above the bed. Burke removed the painting, revealing only bare wall. Very amusing, Kotzius. Any more jokes like that, and I wasn't jesting, Kotzius interrupted. The safe is cleverly hidden. You must press the button set into the bedpost. Burke found the button and pressed it. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a gleaming safe with a keypad. Oh, lovely, he said. A keypad system. I suppose you'll refuse to give me the code? Not at all. The code is 9542. Burke's eyes narrowed. You're being awfully helpful. Any particular reason? I want you out of my house, and realize I won't be rid of you until you have the briefcase. In fact, I may not live through the next 15 minutes if you don't find it. Burke hesitated, then stepped back. I think I'll let you do it, Kotzius. Come over here and type in 9542. Kotzius's lips tightened. What difference does it make who types it, as long as it's correct? I'm not convinced it is. I've heard of safes that electrocute anyone entering a false code. Yours wouldn't be like that, would it? Of course not. That is absurd. Then step over and type it in. Move. Burke leveled his USP at Kotsius' head. If your guards attack because you're uncooperative, you'll be the first to go. Kotsius approached the keypad, his fingers hovering before entering the code. The safe's door swung open, and Burke noted the digits 9545. I knew I couldn't trust you. To be safe, why don't you take out the briefcase and open it so we can all see what's inside? With pleasure. Kotsius reached in, but instead of complying, he swung the briefcase at Burke's head. Pain exploded as the metal edge struck, stars bursting in his vision. A shot rang out, and through blurred eyes, Burke saw Kotsius slump against the bed, clutching his side. Lyndsey stood firm, her pistol steady, her expression calm. He'll be fine, she said, eyeing Kotsius coolly. I nicked him. Kotsius glared, silent, his breath ragged. Burke shook his head, clearing the fog. Now that we have the briefcase, we'd better move. We can't go out the way we came. Halls will be crawling with guards. Lyndsey crossed to the window, pulling the curtains aside. No one's on the grounds. They're probably inside, coming for us. A barrage of blows hammered the door, wood splintering under the assault. Sounds like the cavalry, Burke said. The window it is. He unlatched it, sliding it open. Put Kotsius out of commission while I secure the rope. We don't want him opening the door or cutting it while we're dangling. With pleasure. Lyndsey delivered a sharp blow to Kotsius' head, knocking him out, and joined Burke at the window. The door groaned under relentless pounding. Burke tied the rope to a bedpost, tossing the rest out of the window. You go first. Take the briefcase. Lyndsey nodded, securing the briefcase under her arm and sliding down the rope with practiced ease. Burke climbed onto the sill, knowing there'd be no time for a controlled descent. Rope burn, here I come, he muttered, gripping the rope and dropping. Halfway down, the door crashed open. Burke hit the ground, rolling to absorb the impact. He grabbed the briefcase from Lyndsey, and they sprinted across the lawn toward a cluster of trees. A guard appeared at the window, spotting them. Burke braced for a shot, but the man grabbed a radio, shouting into it. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing up the turf around them like a minefield. A hot sting grazed Burke's arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. The barking of dogs grew louder, their snarls closing in. Burke drew his USP ready to fire. A massive shape loomed ahead, the estate's perimeter wall 8 feet high. Burke dropped the briefcase, cupping his hands. Give me your foot, I'll boost you up. Lyndsey stepped into his hands, and he propelled her upward. She scrambled onto the wall, calling down, Watch the barbed wire. Only a couple of strands, but it's vicious. Burke handed her the briefcase. A panting snarl sounded behind him, and he jammed his USP into its holster, leaping for a low tree branch. Teeth grazed his heel as he swung up, climbing until he was level with the wall. A guard fired, the shot splintering bark near his face. Burke edged along the branch, aiming for the wall. The limb sagged, creaking ominously. He stretched out, fingers brushing the wall but finding no grip. The branch snapped. Burke lunged, hands closing on barbed wire. Pain seared his palms as the barbs bit deep, but he held on, teeth gritted, and pulled himself up. Another bullet whizzed past his ear. He reached the top, spotting Lyndsey below on the other side. The moon broke through the clouds, silhouetting him perfectly. Burke jumped, rolling as he landed to cushion the impact, pain shooting through his twisted ankle. Lyndsey steadied him, her arm around his waist, and they stumbled down the hillside toward their waiting car. The briefcase clutched tightly. 21. Upon returning to their hotel, Burke opened the briefcase and looked through the papers. They appeared authentic and in perfect order. He contacted Moore and told him the good word. You're still in danger, Tiger, both you and Venus. Change hotels for the night and make immediate reservations on the next flight back to the States. Chief, I have loose ends to tie up here. Can't we stay until... Absolutely not. Your mission was to recover the briefcase. You have completed that assignment and must return immediately. We cannot jeopardize the integrity of the mission on mere niceties. But, Tiger, you have your orders. Carry them out. Early the next morning, while the sky was still dark, he and Lyndsey gathered their bags together and carried them down to the car. Going somewhere, Mr. Burke? Burke's head jerked and he stared at the speaker. Any objections? Not as long as you grant me one request. Only one? Burke said. The briefcase. You leave it with me. Oh, is that all? Burke loaded the luggage into the car. Thanks for your offer, but we must be going. We have a plane to catch. I would not suggest you resist, Mr. Burke. You might get hurt. Burke laughed. Pardon my skepticism, but I don't see you taking on even one of us, much less both at the same time. I will not have to. The little man pointed over his shoulder, and Burke risked a backward glance. 3 men were approaching them from out of an alley, each armed with various street weapons, clubs, and chains. Your henchmen, eh? The man motioned to his confederates, and they moved in. Before you 4 gentlemen beat us into unrecognizable pulps, Burke said, would you mind answering one question? Who are you, and what is your connection to this case? 2 questions, the man said, smiling, but no matter. I am an independent agent, you might say. Independent? Burke looked at the 3 menacing figures behind him. I assure you those men are mercenary. They do not obey my orders out of loyalty or belief in a cause. If I were to stop paying them their wages, they would turn on me as fast as they would you. How did an independent agent get so much information? Burke asked. I assume you're the one who tried to shoot me while I was driving to my hotel on my first day here, and had a man waiting for me at the hotel. You seem well informed for a free agent. I must admit I have more sources than most, the man said. And those sources are? Your boss, J. Carlton Moore, for one. Burke laughed. Are you telling me the Onyx Sector chief leaked information to you? If that's true, why did you ask me to kill him? You'd be losing your primary source of information. Am I to assume it was you who took a shot at me at the Parthenon? The man said. It was, Burke replied, and if the sight had been zeroed in properly, I would have hit you too. Then I am fortunate, the man said. To answer your question, the demand was to give you the idea we were offering you a bargain and not setting you up for a trap. We would not have allowed you to carry out the plan, specifically because had you met with me at the Acropolis, you would have been killed. Not very sportsmanlike of you. No, but expedient. In answer to your other question, Moore was not aware he was giving me this information, but he was nonetheless. Are you aware Mr. Moore has been battling depression? Depression? What does that have to do with... I am his psychiatrist. Throughout his visits to my office, I gathered information from him through advanced relaxation and hypnosis techniques. The system worked beautifully. You learned about the briefcase and changed professions? Burke was finding this difficult to swallow. No, Mr. Burke, I already knew about the briefcase and its importance. Had I not known, it is unlikely I would have stumbled upon any sensitive information. As it was, I could ask specific questions and get specific answers. I was a Scorpion agent even while practicing. And all the time, Moore was unaware what was happening. Mostly, yes. Do not misunderstand, this did not happen overnight. It took a long time to condition him before I could get information. You learned the details about the mission and acted independently of Scorpion. It's much more profitable that way. It would have been a simple matter, but I did not figure on things going wrong so quickly, and you kept getting in my way. Oh, I'm sorry to have inconvenienced you, Burke said. All is well that ends well, as they say. Now, the briefcase, if you please. The man reached out his hand to take it, but instead of handing it to him, Burke grabbed his wrist and pulled the man toward him. Burke wrapped an arm around the man's throat, holding him in front, putting him between Burke and the advancing hoodlums. Call your men off, Doc, or I'll break your neck. Burke slowly applied pressure. The man gagged and struggled. Don't try it, Doc. You'll never get away. Your men might get me, but you're going out with me. He squeezed a little harder. You are choking me. I'm aware of that, Doc. Call them off. All right, all right. Burke relaxed his grip, but did not release the man. Come on, tell them to get lost or I'm snapping you like a twig. I'm counting to 3, Doc. 1, 2, all right. The little man waved his small army away. I have changed my mind. We will not kill these people. For the first time, one of the other men spoke. Our money. Do we still get our money? Say yes, Doc, Burke muttered. Yes, of course, you will be paid. Tell them to get lost, Burke said. Go to the meeting place, the man ordered. I will meet you there with your money. Go now. The 3 ruffians ambled away, glancing back as if waiting for a bullet in the back. Burke released the man, and the doctor stood, wincing and massaging his throat. What are you going to do with me? Burke shrugged. Nothing. Right now we have strict orders to return home. See you in the States? I think that most unlikely. That's probably wise. When Moore learns you've taken advantage of his patient's rights, he'll be furious. Burke reached into the car and pulled a length of rope from the pack of equipment. While Lyndsey held her gun on the little man, Burke tied and gagged their prisoner. Glancing at his watch, Burke whistled. We better hurry if we're going to make the plane. He threw Lyndsey the keys. I'll throw this educated bum into the alley, and we'll get the hell out of here. 22. The flight to New York droned on, the hum of the jet engines a steady backdrop to the quiet cabin. After the chaos of Athens, the cliffside climb, the firefight in Katya's mansion, and the final confrontation with the rogue Scorpion agent, Burke found the calm almost surreal. Anything less than a full-blown crisis felt mundane by comparison. They sat side by side, the briefcase secured in the overhead compartment, its contents safe and their mission complete. Lyndsey stared out the window, her eyes distant. Burke leaned back, his hands folded, content to let the silence stretch. Burke, Lyndsey said at last, her voice soft, breaking the quiet. Yeah? She hesitated, as if weighing her words, her usual confidence tempered by something deeper. Do you think Stu would have approved of me? The question was simple, but Burke caught the weight behind it, the vulnerability in her tone. Lyndsey wasn't one to seek validation. Her strength as an agent had always been unshakable. But the night in Damascus had left scars. Burke sensed this was more than a question. It was a step toward healing, a fragile reach for the self-assurance she'd lost. He met her gaze, his voice steady and sincere. I know he would have, Lyndsey. She fell silent, her eyes drifting back to the window, the clouds below a soft blur. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice quieter still. It was a mistake, wasn't it? Burke didn't need to answer. The question wasn't for him. It was Lyndsey, grappling with her guilt, beginning to loosen its hold. A warmth spread through him, a quiet relief. She had a long road ahead to reclaim the fearless agent she'd been before that tragic night, but this was a start. And for now, that was enough. If you enjoyed this book, a review would mean the world. Reviews are so important to authors and are essential to being able to market books effectively. Just a line or two makes a huge difference. Thank you for listening. This was Never Spy Alone, an Onyx Sector adventure. Written and narrated by Craig A. Hart. Copyright 2025 by Craig A. Hart. Production copyright 2025 by Craig A. Hart.